Okay, so I welcome everyone. It's 6 o'clock. Welcome to our November, 17th meeting of the City Council. And do we want to mention our technical situation here?
Yes, I will give a brief update. This evening, we do not have a video feed, so it will just be audio and the PowerPoint only. So those watching on Zoom or Facebook or YouTube or the city website will see the PowerPoint and hear you guys speaking, but there will be no video feed.
Okay, so thank you for that. So with that, could you call the meeting to order? If you could do a roll call, please.
Councilmember Edwards.
Here.
Councilmember Kelly.
Here.
Vice Mayor Herod.
Here.
Mayor Mitchell.
Here. And Councilmember Hegley is a bit under the weather, so he won't be with us tonight, and he probably won't even be watching now. So if you would like to, please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So thank you for that. A motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, agenda is approved. Report on closed session. We did not have a closed session, so there is nothing to report. Announcements and presentations. We have a proclamation commemorating Smith Robinson Volunteer Spirit Day, and Councilmember Edwards is going to read the proclamation.
A proclamation of the city of Healdsburg honoring November 8th, 2025 as Smith Robinson Volunteer Spirit Day in the city of Healdsburg. Whereas the Robinson family was the only African-American family in town when Jesse and Elzora Robinson moved to Healdsburg in 1919, and their son, Smith Robinson, stand out in Healdsburg history as the community's beloved ambassador of goodwill. And whereas a popular student leader and star athlete, Smith graduated from Healdsburg High School in 1927. And despite a life-threatening heart condition, Smith devoted the rest of his life to service, and he became a track and football coach for the high school, an assistant scout leader, director of the youth chancel choir at the Healdsburg Federated Church. And whereas unable to serve in the military, he contributed to the war effort by helping to raise morale. He wrote hundreds of personal letters a month and mailed Smitty Scoops, his hometown newsletter, to every Healdsburg service member. And during the Korean War, Smith supported the adoption of the 1st Battalion of the U.S. Army's 7th Infantry Registry, and Healdsburg Mayor Ron Henderson issued a proclamation in 1951 for the city of Healdsburg to officially adopt the battalion. And whereas every service club, congregation, and volunteer group contributed time, labor, gifts, and money to the soldiers, the grateful soldiers received shipments of magazines, cookies, tobacco, candles, radio, stationery, sewing kits, and toiletries. And whereas Smith Robinson, a Healdsburg Rotary Club member and chair of Sonoma County Council for Civics Unity, became famous for his support of the troops and local youth. And in 1953, Smith Robinson was the Grand Marshal of the FFA parade. In 1954, he was surprised as a featured guest on the television show This Is Your Life. And in November of 1960, was named Ambassador of Goodwill by the Healdsburg City Council. Smith died at the age of 55 in 1963. And whereas Smith Robinson's gymnasium at Healdsburg High School was dedicated the following year and still remembers today, Smith Robinson's legacy of friendship, service, amplifies the volunteer spirit of Healdsburg. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Healdsburg honors November 8th, 2025 as Smith Robinson's Volunteer Spirit Day in the City of Healdsburg.
Thank you, Ron. And Holly Hoods, I think you would like to receive this on behalf of Smith Robinson.
I bought a photo of the Robinson family in the 1950s. You can see Fitch Mountain in the background. So I'll just come up to the.
Just the podium.
Oh, okay. So I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you.
You want to say something about
If you just want to say something.
Oh, yeah, okay. Sorry.
Whatever you want to say.
I'm the director, I'm Holly Hoods, I'm the director of the Healdsburg Museum. I've worked for the Healdsburg Museum going on 30 years. And in all that time, I have researched a lot of people and a lot of stories in Healdsburg history. Smith Robinson and his story of community service and community spirit rises to the top of the people in Healdsburg who have really made a contribution. And I think honoring his birthday is a really good way to inspire the community to acts of service and community spirit. So thanks to the City Council for honoring his memory and his legacy. I'm happy to share that with the community.
Thank you.
Thank
Maybe
you.
come up and get a picture with us?
Yes.
And we can show your picture in the picture.
See how many proclamations I've had. How about a big giant picture that's full of those big giant screens? I totally will put it in here. Thanks, everybody.
And I'd like to mention there are two streets in the city of Healdsburg named after Smith Robinson. One is Smith Court, and the other one is Robinson Court. I used to live on Robinson Court, which is just a block up from Smith Court. So there's a lot of recognition of the day, which is really wonderful. I appreciate that. So thank you. Now we go on to city manager reports. City Manager Kay.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of calendar updates and reminders and then a couple other general announcements for you this evening. First off, in terms of a few things to watch for on your calendar, next Thursday, Thanksgiving, is the turkey trot. So for those who want to get up early at 8 a.m. on Thanksgiving and do a little running, we expect to have at least a couple thousand participants, usually a great, well-attended event. So just a reminder to people who feel like a Thanksgiving Day run. I mentioned last time, but just a reminder, December 5th, that's a Friday, will be Mary Healdsburg. I think I also noted at our last meeting that we anticipated the tree being delivered. I'm pleased to report the tree is here. It's upright. It was installed in quite a rainstorm, but everything went fine. And so we're ready to go and looking forward to that event. So we will decorate the tree between now and then and light it up and celebrate on the 5th of December. And then one more, we've let the council know, but I wanted to share publicly that on December 15th, after much waiting, we will celebrate a ribbon cutting for the Foley Family Community Pavilion right across the street. I go look every day and try to monitor the construction, and we are getting there. We are definitely in the home stretch. I think the pavers, weather permitting, the pavers in the parking lot should be going in this week. We turned on power last week. The building is fully lit up and has electricity, and so a lot of the AV is getting wrapped up. So we're definitely in the home stretch. And again, before the council meeting on Monday, the 15th of December, we'll do a little ceremony and a ribbon cutting. I know on Monday, late afternoon isn't the most festive, but I know our team's going to do a good job making it feel that way. So we'll celebrate the holidays and the completion of a long-awaited project. So we're excited about that. And then a couple of announcements The first relates to that project, as I wanted to share that the Foley Family Community Pavilion was a recipient this year of one of the North Bay Business Journal Excellence in Construction Awards. Those who know me know that when it's not quite finished, I think that's the jinx of the century to award business construction. But it's been announced, it's been published, so I'll might as well share it. All the same, it's absolutely a testament to a really, really neat project, as you all know, with all of the history and planning and strategy and vision that went into that project. So it's a pretty big deal. These awards are given out every year. This year there are 15, and I know the mayor and our community services team will accept that award, I think this coming Thursday, at a ceremony in Napa. So a great honor, and we'll make sure that the jinx doesn't apply and we'll wrap that thing up swiftly. I also wanted to note of those 15 projects, there's actually 2 that are in Healdsburg. The other is the True West Film Center. So not a city project, but we're still very proud to celebrate with them. Everybody at the True West Film Center and Edinger Enterprises, which was the contractor, I know will be also proud, and we're proud to see them. So out of 15 projects in the North Bay, 2 are right here in Healdsburg and pretty much across the street from each other. So a cool reminder and recognition of all of that energy that we're bringing to that corner of downtown. So that's great news. And then one last update. I just wanted to share, there were a couple of meetings last week, and others on the council might share this when you all report out later. But a couple of opportunities to meet with the Redwood Empire Food Bank. The mayor and I met with their director last week, and she also spoke at the board of directors meeting of the Sonoma County Mayors and Council Members Association. And just a really important and impactful opportunity to learn about this organization right now when they are very much in the news and in our thoughts as we hear about threats and challenges to food benefits. And their director shared something that I know went to the whole council, but some pretty striking numbers that I thought I would share that came out of this. Each year, by their count, 4,096 people in Healdsburg are helped in some way by the food bank. So that might be a food distribution, essential goods that they put together, senior baskets, school programs. That's 4,100 people, 1,100 households, 330 seniors. I don't know if that includes the Healdsburg mailing addresses that are outside of the incorporated city of Healdsburg. I almost hope it does, because otherwise that's 38% of our population. But in any event, it's a really significant share of our population. So I think it's just a reminder of how many people in our community rely on those types of services. And so we're lucky to benefit from that organization, from our local pantry. We're proud as an organization to host. I think there's 7 regular food distributions in town. And just in playing a very small role, the city hosts. Just this afternoon, there was one here at City Hall, and it's there every Monday. But pretty much every day of the week, there's a food distribution, and they're all pretty busy. And that predates everything that's going on this month or this year. They're always busy. And now it's just a little bit more scary as we think about those benefits. Obviously, with the shutdown ending, one particular scary threat to food programs has abated for now. But I know it's been a challenging time for them in general. And again, even when it's not a challenging time, it was an important reminder that they serve a very significant share of people in our community. So that's a little sobering, but it's also really heartening to know that we're lucky to have and to partner with some really great organizations that are doing good work. So just wanted to share that. I apologize if I'm trespassing on a report out from later in the meeting, but who knows, saying it twice might be valuable too. And that's all I have this evening. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions for the city manager? No?
Quick comment.
Vice Mayor.
I just want to add to that section of the city manager report that the food benefits people, farm pantry, food pantry, and so on. They've all reported an increase in giving and contributions from the community to meet this greater need that they've experienced too. So I think that's a big part of the story and really reflects well on the, in my mind, well-known generosity that we see here in Healdsburg.
I couldn't agree more. Yes, that's true. And she mentioned that, I think, in her discussion too, that, yeah, there's a lot more. Of course, you can't probably work your way out of the financial hole that some of this is, the SNAP benefits and so on, but it's helpful.
Yeah,
Right.
I think one of the interesting things that came out of that was how they can multiply a dollar contribution. For every dollar they get in, they can multiply that times 3 in purchasing additional food supplies. So it's very important to understand how when you donate to it, it really has a big impact.
Yes, it does. Thank you. Okay, so now we'll move on to public comments on items on the consent calendar and non-agenda items. This time is set aside to receive comments from the public regarding matters of general interest not on the agenda, but related to City Council business pursuant to the Brown Act. However, the council cannot consider any issues or take action on any requests during this comment period. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to make a public comment? Okay, not seeing anyone come forward. I'll bring it back and entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second?
Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes. Okay, so now we're going to go on to public hearings. We have 3 tonight. The first one with building official David Willoughby, the 2025 California Building Standards with amendments. Welcome.
My name is David Willoughby. Thank you. So this is for the second reading of the adoption of the 2025 California Building Standards Code and the 2024 International Property Maintenance Code and local amendments. So the recommended action in summary is to repeal Chapter 1504 of the Healdsburg Municipal Code as currently in effect and pass an ordinance amending Chapter 1504 of the Healdsburg Municipal Code and adopt by reference the 2025 California Building Standards Code Title 24 as amended and the 2024 International Property Maintenance Code as amended. Assembly Bill 130 was signed by the governor and went into effect on June 30th, 2025. And this limits the local amendments affecting residential projects to only those filed with the California Building Standards Commission and in effect by September 30th, 2025. This extends the residential building standards until the year 2031. The purpose for the ordinance is the state adopts the building standards codes on a triennial cycle. But local adoption of the 2025 California Building Standards Code and local amendments are also required to provide adequate protection to our community. The City Council introduced the ordinance on November 3rd. There are 3 proposed changes that have been outlined, and that is in the Municipal Code, Chapter 15.04.020, California Building Code Amendment, replace a reference to the 2022 California Fire Code with the 2025 California Fire Code. And in Chapter 15.04.030, California Residential Code Amendment, replace all references to Appendix AX with Appendix CI. And in Chapter 15.04.070, California Existing Building Code Amendments, replace Section 116 with Section 115. So the recommended action in summary again is to repeal Chapter 15.04 of the Healdsburg Municipal Code as currently in effect and pass an ordinance amending Chapter 15.04 of the Healdsburg Municipal Code and adopt by reference the 2025 California Building Standards Code Title 24 as amended and the 2024 International Property Maintenance Code as amended. Do you have any questions?
Thank you for that report. Council, any questions? Questions? No questions. So I'll open it up to public comment. Do we have anybody who would like to comment on this? Not seeing anyone come forward. Would someone like to make a motion?
Yeah, I make a motion that we repeal Chapter 15.04 of the Healdsburg Municipal Code as currently in effect and pass an ordinance amending Chapter 15.04 of the Healdsburg Municipal Code and adopt by reference the 2025 California Building Standards Codes Title 24, which includes the California Administrative Code Part 1, the California Building Code Part 2, Volumes 1 and 2, including Appendix Chapter B and J as amended, the California Residential Code Part 2.5 as amended, the California Electrical Code Part 3 and tables as amended, California Mechanical Code Part 4 and standards as amended, the California Plumbing Code Part 5 and standards as amended, the California Energy Code Part 6, the California Wildland Urban Interface Code Part 7, the California Historical Code Part 8, the California Fire Code Parts 9 as amended, the California Existing Building Code Part 10 as amended, the California Green Building Standards Code, Part 11 as amended, the California Reference Standard Code, Part 12, and the 2024 International Property Maintenance Code as amended.
Second the motion?
Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes. Thank you, Ron, for that. That was quite a motion. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, he is here. Okay, so the second public hearing, amendment of inclusionary housing ordinance in lieu fee elimination for projects under 5 units. Housing Director Stephen Sotomayor, welcome.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Stephen Sotomayor, Housing Director. Tonight is the first reading of a narrowly tailored amendment to the inclusionary housing ordinance in line with council direction that was given to us on August 18th to remove the in lieu fee requirement for projects with less than 5 units. No other policy areas are being addressed today. Next slide. Okay. The recommended action is to introduce the ordinance by title only and to waive further reading. This is a focused amendment intended to eliminate the in lieu fee. Our current ordinance overview is the current ordinance has a 20% inclusionary requirement for projects of 5 units or more, with fractional unit options, including in lieu fees. Projects with 1 to 4 units currently under our ordinance have to pay either an in lieu fee or pursue alternative compliance, and which is what we're proposing to eliminate today. Next slide. This amendment, consistent with the August 18th direction, this amendment will remove the in lieu fees for projects with less than 5 units. The rationale, as we explained earlier, was that this encourages small builders and homeowners that face higher per unit costs. In lieu fees can often represent 20–30% of total city fees. It's in line with different state legislation, which is now allowing more units to be built on parcels. And the hope is to encourage and remove barriers to missing middle housing. And this also is in line with the City Council fiscal year 25-26 goal to update the in lieu fee for smaller projects, including the definition of smaller projects to decrease cost barriers for small infill housing projects. Next slide. So in the summary, it clarifies the applicability of projects of 5 or more dwelling units. It exempts residential additions and replacement units, and it eliminates the in lieu fee option for projects with less than 4 units. Next slide. The fiscal impact. So since 2019, as we discussed previously, we've collected about $890,000 in lieu fees. Approximately about 30% of those came from small projects. So there will be a reduction in revenue that comes through this elimination of the in lieu fee. with the hope that what it will do is encourage more building, remove a barrier to building, and be in alignment with state law, which encourages higher density on parcels. This could be a way to encourage that. The city, there's no expenditures required for this other than the staff resources to put together this ordinance at this point. Next slide. And so that takes us back to the action. Just as a reminder, the Planning Commission heard this and made a recommendation to the City Council to adopt the ordinance as amended without any further recommendation. That completes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Council have any questions? No? No? Okay, we'll open this up to public comment. No one come forward. We'll bring it back. Would someone like to make a motion then? You have a question?
I know, sorry, I mean, more of a comment / question. We talked about this the last time we were discussing this item, so I feel like we got a lot of questions answered at that juncture. I know at the time we were discussing what the threshold number of units would be or should be, and there was kind of a conversation around should that be 5 units? Should that be 10 units? We're struggling to see a lot of these like small scale developments happen for a variety of reasons. Some would say it's zoning or cost of construction and I'm curious if there is flexibility if we did want to change it to 10 or more as opposed to 5 or more when it kicks in. Do we have the option to do that at this juncture?
I believe that the way that this ordinance has been brought forward and gone through the process, we had a noticing requirement as a part of that. I believe that we made additional change. I'll look at our city attorney. We would have to go back through that to do so if we wanted to look at that. But today was specifically just around the in lieu fee.
I'm pulling up that ordinance now. It's always a question about whether or not something that is a change that lives in your land use code would have to go back to the Planning Commission. And usually we say if it is more conservative than something that the Planning Commission considered, it's not need to go back. I don't know what the commission considered.
They considered only the in lieu fee.
Okay, so you likely could not make that change without restarting the process.
I'm sorry, I don't understand when you're saying they only considered the in lieu fee and the fee would remain consistent. It would be just when it is required to be paid or when the inclusionary ordinance is mandated. No?
So what we brought forward to the Planning Commission was substantially similar to what we brought to the council. At the time that we first brought it, we talked about the 10-unit threshold. I believe the council was not interested at revisiting that. So when we took it to the Planning Commission, we did not discuss that item. We solely focused on eliminating the fee for projects with less than 5 units.
I'm sorry, I think I misunderstood. I think that Councilmember Kelly's question was, the ordinance would eliminate the fee for developments of fewer than 5 units. You're asking, could we raise that to developments of fewer than 10 units?
Yes.
So I would assume that that was encompassing what the Planning Commission considered. And so I think that would be fine for the council to, you could make that change tonight if you wanted to.
Okay, so then I guess my next question is more of a practical question for you, is if we made that change, do you think it would yield more housing getting built? Like, is this fee that we're asking of developers a limiting factor in getting housing built in Healdsburg?
I would say that that would require a little bit more thought, but if I'm getting this correct, if we were to look at it, projects that are already going to be over 5 units will have an on-site requirement. And so raising that threshold to 10 are starting to affect the on-site requirements that they would have to build on the actual site. So, thinking about that, that's not something that was really put into contemplation other than looking at what state laws are out there, and generally 10 units is the threshold. I think a good example is if we look at Ward Street, for example, it was a project with 6 units that came in. We're getting 1 on-site inclusionary unit with that. So it is to our benefit to continue to have that. I think in the past council meeting, we did discuss that it also helps with our negotiation with larger developments when we have a lower threshold. I think once you get into that level of scale, though, the ability to absorb the on-site units is easier than, for example, like a homeowner trying to do 4 units or something of that nature. Generally, we have not seen a ton of projects come in at that 10-unit threshold. So I think it's something that definitely could be considered, but I think right now I would say that the in lieu fee for projects that are smaller is probably more of a pressing barrier than it would be for those that are much larger.
And if I could, I'll just add one thought on that. I'm not aware of a project in that zone that's ever failed to move forward because of the requirement. As Stephen said, we get so few to begin with in that realm that I obviously we don't know, we're just speculating. But for what it's worth, anything in that range, I don't have a data point that says somebody once considered a project and chose not to move forward because of the requirement. So we don't have a lot of evidence that says it would. Could it in the future? Maybe. But we don't have a history of projects walking away because of it.
Okay, great, thank you. I mean, I'm comfortable moving forward with what's proposed and what the Planning Commission reviewed. I think that we're just, we still find ourselves in a pretty dire housing crisis, and we have some really unfortunate specific constraints around the lack of housing that's allowed to be built in Healdsburg because of the growth management ordinance that was, we can only change if the voters choose to change it. Otherwise, we're so strictly limited on the number of housing units that can be built at market rate. And so just trying to figure out what are the puzzle pieces that can unlock this great mystery of solving our housing crisis. And so I think it's, I know we've got a heavy agenda and there's a lot of things yet to come, but I just want to ask the questions because I think we're all still trying to we're banging our head against the wall, figuring out how do we get the housing, how do we change our policies to get community members or developers to build the housing that we so desperately need, and what are the right questions and solutions that we can put forward. So appreciate the exercise. Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
I think it's worth keeping the question open, and I kind of expected that to become in as part of our discussion about investigating a variety of different barriers that we have for housing in Healdsburg, and so I think at that point maybe we could look at it. There was concern at the last meeting where we discussed this that these fees play a very important role in our housing program, and we really don't want to endanger them without good cause. I mean, that was the crux of your question, and but it is important that we look at every little thing that we can do. And so I guess between now and then, if we had any insight into moving the threshold would have on housing, it'd be good to know, because it's a chance we could chew on that a little bit longer and go through that process at a later time. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
And I think, Director Sittemore, if we had somebody that was desperate to put it, or there came to us and said, we want to put 10 units in, the council could always review it at that time, the Planning Commission.
So if a project came in under the ordinance and they had an on-site requirement, there is within the ordinance the alternate compliance that allows the council to accept something different than what is in the ordinance. It's a process that's outlined in there, so potentially they could come forward and propose an alternate to that.
So if somebody is thinking about doing that, we wouldn't stop them. There's just a process that we would go at this council or future council that could make that adjustment to allow a project to either go forward or not go forward.
I think it's within, the council could make a decision on some kind of alternate way to meet the goals of the IHO, whether that be if they're going to provide a certain amount of units at, let's say, a missing middle AMI versus having a different split, or provide a piece of land instead of building on the site, as long as it's meeting the requirements of what's outlined for their inclusionary requirement in general.
All right, thank you very much.
I think it's important to keep a focus on the inclusionary requirement, because for 10 units, that would get us, what, 2 housing units? So, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say on this kind of thing. So I think we need to proceed with caution. I think the under 5 as proposed makes sense. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. And I think also just when we have these types of items agendized, since we so rarely get to know how everybody else on the dais, feels about where the right levers we can be pulling around housing, it's helpful, honestly, because we don't have these conversations elsewhere. We aren't allowed to. And so the other thing I wanted to ask about that was in your staff report is around SB 10, which is the opting in for upzoning for 10 units, which is another new state law that we're looking at, another state law that we could choose to adopt. It's not mandatory, it's an opt-in. And so I think the question I had was, is that something that is with the next set of housing policies that are coming through the planning and building and then the planning commission, are we going to see a recommendation around SB 10? Is that something the city is looking at adopting? I attended a housing summit last week with many other jurisdictions in the city of Healdsburg and other members of the council who were also in attendance. And there was a lot of talk about SB 10 and jurisdictions that haven't chosen to opt in. And of course, I'm curious if we are choosing to opt in and who makes that decision.
So I don't know if I can speak if that's coming forward, but maybe I can look over at our community development director who's saying, well, he's going to come up and perhaps have a more detailed answer than I could provide.
Yeah, excuse me, at this point in time, we're not considering bringing forward SB 10. Part of that reason is subsequent to SB 10, there was 684 and 1123 that allow up to 10 units on any residentially zoned parcel, or as well as multifamily zoned parcels, which kind of covers it with a lot less effort. We did some research when we were preparing kind of an outline of all the new housing legislation that we had presented to you a few months ago. And as part of that research, there isn't a jurisdiction in the state that has opted to move forward with SB 10. So given limited staff resources and a focus on the other legislation that we think that we do need to incorporate into our zoning ordinance, that was kind of the best course of action for us at this point in time.
I'm so glad you brought that up because that is literally the next bullet point in our staff report, which is SB 684 and 1123. So are those two pieces of policy, those are mandatory, so it's not you have to choose to opt in like SB 10?
Those are mandatory, and what we're doing is adopting them locally to make sure that we get, the best implementation of those laws here in Healdsburg.
Great.
So those will be coming forward. We were hoping to bring them all together tonight, but there was even more changes to state legislation back in October, and we're still reviewing those before we bring those back to the Planning Commission and ultimately the City Council.
Thank you so much.
We're looking at them.
Great.
So would someone like to, if we don't have any more comments or questions, make a motion?
I make a motion to introduce the first reading by title only, waiving further reading of the text and ordinance amending sections 20.20.030 of Healdsburg Municipal Code, inclusionary housing ordinance, to eliminate the in lieu fee or alternate compliance requirements for projects with fewer than 5 units.
Second.
A roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes. Thank you. And next up, Senior Planner Ellen McDowell, Land Use Code amendments to address changes in state accessory dwelling units, ADU, law and state density bonus law.
All right. Yes. Good evening, Mayor Mitchell and council members. I'm Ellen McDowell. And tonight we'll be looking at state housing legislation, land use code updates for accessory dwelling units, and density bonus law. The recommended action tonight is to introduce for first reading an ordinance amending Healdsburg Municipal Code Title 20, accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units, and definitions to reflect changes in state ADU laws. And the second will be to introduce for first reading an ordinance amending Healdsburg Municipal Code Title 20, affordable housing incentives, to reflect changes in state density bonus law. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. Um, so the city's housing element was adopted on May 1st of 2023 and certified by the state in June. The housing element includes a program calling for amendments to the city's land use code that expand housing development and capacity and reduce constraints, including increasing density. On September 2nd, 2025, staff provided an update to the City Council on state housing legislation, and this update included new updates to accessory dwelling unit and density bonus laws. On September 23rd, 2025, the Planning Commission held a workshop and reviewed and considered draft ordinances to the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, density bonus, SB 9, SB 684, and SB 1123. Staff was able to prepare the accessory dwelling unit and density bonus ordinances to take back to the Planning Commission on October 28th. I had intended to return with 2 additional ordinances to implement SB 9 and SB 684 and 1123, as discussed at the September workshop. However, there was new legislation introduced in October, so we needed a little bit of additional time to make any changes that these might have presented at that time. I have noted here that we were tentatively going to take it in December, but it looks like we'll be taking that in January, and then it will come back to council probably in February. On October 28th, the Planning Commission adopted a resolution recommending that the City Council adopt an ordinance approving these updates, and that the City Council consider eliminating impact fees associated with ADUs greater than 850 square feet up to the maximum of 1,200 square feet. Next slide, thank you. Senate Bill 1211 went into effect on January 1st, 2025, and it expands opportunities for constructing accessory dwelling units on property zoned for multifamily residential. Prior accessory dwelling unit laws allowed for 2 detached ADUs per lot with any existing multifamily dwelling. And SB 1211 allows for up to 8 detached ADUs, provided that the total does not exceed the number of pre-existing units on the property. So for example, if there was 6 units on a property, they could put 6 ADUs. If there were 10 existing units on a property, they could put 8. And if the project is new, they would only be allowed to do 2 accessory dwelling units as part of a new development. A vacant parcel may include up to 2 detached ADUs with a proposed multifamily dwelling. And in addition, the bill prohibits a local agency from requiring the replacement of off-street parking spaces if an uncovered space is demolished in conjunction with the construction of an ADU. These changes have been incorporated into the existing accessory dwelling unit and junior accessory dwelling unit section, and incorporate all these applicable state laws. And the ordinance has also been reviewed by our legal team. On October 8th, the city received a letter from the California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HUD, advising that the city's accessory dwelling unit ordinance was outdated and required some updates. Luckily, we were already in the process of doing that. So edits have been incorporated to bring the ADU ordinance up to date with the state legislation that was adopted in 2019 and in response to the letter we received from HCD. So these further amendments include additional incentives to allow junior accessory dwelling units that include a bathroom, removal of the historic district standards for the construction of JADUs and ADUs, removal of the deed restriction requirement, and it also clarifies that impact fees are exempt from units of 850 square feet or less. The state size for ADUs is 750 square feet, and the city allows for 850 or less to be exempt from any impact fees. Anything larger than 850 square feet up to 1,200 can have impacts on the neighborhood, and thus impact fees are paid on anything greater than 850. Impact fees are calculated at 50% of the single-family unit square footage on the site. Additionally, it clarifies the process for streamlining timelines for ADU and JADU approvals, and amends the definitions for JADUs and ADUs. Assembly Bill 1287 was signed into law in October of 2023 and enhances the state density bonus law to promote development of affordable and moderate income housing. It was effective on January 1st, 2024, and the law introduced additional incentives for housing projects that exceed existing affordability requirements. The changes include stackable density bonuses, which allow developers an additional density bonus ranging from 20 to 50% if they provide more affordable units. This could allow a proposed project of 100 units to potentially achieve 200 units with the density bonus and the stackable density bonus. It expands incentives and concessions that will increase the available concessions from 2 to 4. Clarification of density definitions that redefine the maximum allowable residential density and applicability to various ownership models, which would apply to both for sale and rental housing developments. These changes have also been incorporated into the existing ordinance and meet the state law requirement. So density bonuses can be a little bit of a complicated topic. So I wanted to provide an example just to kind of clarify and try and simplify it. So for example, if a parcel was allowed to have 100 units, this would be considered their base density. If a project were to propose 15% very low income units, they could qualify for a 50% density bonus. So that would bring them to 150 units if 15% were very low. The deeper affordability on this would mean the fewer number of units they need to provide to get that density bonus. So for example, if they wanted the 50% bonus, but wanted to provide low income rather than very low income, they would need to provide 24% to be eligible for that 50% bonus. So there's also the stackable density bonus now. And so in addition, if they provide an additional 15% moderate income units, they could receive another 50% bonus, bringing the total number of units to 200 units with 15% very low income and 15% moderate income. So the schedule for adoption of the accessory dwelling units and density bonus ordinances went to Planning Commission on October 28th. We went to City Council for first reading on November 17th today, and would come back for a tentative second reading on December 15th. The schedule for adoption of SB 9, 684, and 1123 has changed slightly. So we now anticipate the Planning Commission to hear this in January, followed by Council in February. The recommended action for this evening is to introduce for first reading by title only, waiving further reading of the text, an ordinance amending Healdsburg Municipal Code Title 20, Section 20.20.010, accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units, and Section 20.28310, definitions to reflect changes in state ADU law. And second, to introduce by first reading by title only, waiving further reading of the text, and ordinance amending Healdsburg Municipal Code Title 20, Section 20.20035, affordable housing incentives to reflect changes in state density bonus law. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Council have questions? No? Councilmember Kelly.
I didn't see anything in the packet that outlined the fee structure for ADUs, and I believe the Planning Commission proposed a formula that I don't understand the way that it's written. So I'm wondering what's before us tonight with respect to ADU fees.
So nothing with respect to ADU fees is before you this evening. The fees are part of the fee schedule. So the fee schedule would need to be changed as a separate process.
How come that was something that was discussed by the Planning Commission and is included in the packet?
It just came up at the meeting and was something that they wanted the council to consider.
Okay. The current fee schedule has, and this was also something that it looks like HUD called out in the response or in their evaluation of our ADU policies. Is that right? There was something about the fees?
Yes, but we're already complying. So the state requires, the state maximum is 750 square feet. The city has opted to do 850 square feet or less. So we're only charging impact fees between 850 and 1,200 square feet. And it's calculated at half the cost of what the single family dwelling would be for that site.
And what is it that the Planning Commission was proposing?
They were just proposing that the council consider reducing or eliminating all fees associated with accessory dwelling units. So that would mean someone could build an accessory dwelling unit up to 1,200 square feet and not have to pay any development impact fees.
And what was staff's response to that recommendation from the Planning Commission?
Staff's response would be that we do feel that there is an impact. So when you're making a larger ADU that perhaps is 1,200 square feet, that's getting into the realm of what a single family home might be. That might be 3 bedrooms, and that could potentially have some impact.
On what?
On the neighborhood and our water, sewer capacity, traffic.
Got it. And then there is another state law, 1033, which is an ADU conversion to condo law that was talked about at this housing conference that we went to. And it's an opt-in. I'm curious because, again, we're so limited in the types of housing that can be built in Healdsburg because of the voter mandated growth management ordinance that says we can only build 30 houses per year. ADUs are exempt from that, right? So it's a tool that is in our toolbox that if community members wanted to build an ADU tomorrow, they don't have to wait for an allocation. They can just go out and build an ADU should they have the money and the wherewithal to do that. The Assembly Bill 1033 that just came forward allows those ADUs to be turned into condos. And for a lot of residents and a lot of other cities, those become a much more affordable option, whether it's by size or because it's a condo and that type of ownership versus a single family home. So is that something that you all are evaluating as one of the new housing laws that will be reviewed this cycle?
So it's not part of what's before you tonight.
Right. I'm talking about the next set that you guys are looking at that's going to the Planning Commission and then will come to us later.
It is not part of that either. So that is just SB 9, 684, and 1123.
How do we get to request that these optional housing bills that have now been placed into the bevy of options that cities can choose to adopt, how do we make that request, that that's something that gets evaluated, that the city of Healdsburg could opt into this law potentially? I guess who gets to decide when the planning staff brings things to us versus when we have to request them? And since this is potentially a really unique opportunity, I think, especially for a city like Healdsburg that has this growth management ordinance, so we're very limited in what kinds of housing that can get built. Is this something we could discuss and request that you all bring back to us with this next set of housing tools, especially because it's related to ADUs and you guys are already looking at ADUs?
Well, the council can always request anything come back. So that's a normal procedure and the council can make that request if it so desires. And this would be an appropriate forum for that. I will note though that if you hear some of the dates in some of the bills that we're getting into compliance with here, we're a little backed up in terms of getting that done. So I think if that's a desire for the council, I think we'd probably want to do that in the context of a conversation about priorities. Because again, some of these, some of the bills that we're getting into compliance with are a few years old at this point. But that's a question for the council. The council wants to see that expedited. I'm looking at our planning staff. It probably impacts the timing of what you see coming back, but if that's a directive, then we'll act on it.
I guess my feeling is that we have a severe housing crisis. We know we are tens of thousands of units deficient in our region to meet the economic challenge that is before us. We know that housing unlocks so many other things that we talk about. And so when the state adopts these new housing laws and we can choose to opt into them, I feel like we should be prioritizing the ones that I appreciate everything that's happening and I want to see it continue to move forward. And it sounds like we were going to see it maybe later this month and now we're going to see it in later in the winter, but that those are going to hopefully move forward. And so I don't want to slow those down, but also would love to see us be able to put 1033 on the table as an option. I just think about it as like a really great affordable, by design, affordable, like first time home ownership option that's not inclusionary, that's not deed restricted. It's something that someone could own in our community if they can't afford. We know our median home price is so high compared to every other city in the region. Like this could be a great tool. And so I'd love it if we could evaluate it. And I think that'd be having staff look at it and then the planning commission and then us if it's a possibility. And obviously, if there's a majority of the council who wants to see us look at it, but I would love to see that and truly any other housing option that we know will unlock housing units in our city brought forward.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I'd like to see really opportunity to take a look at anything that could help the situations, as you said. So I'm wondering, I know we have it as a goal, looking at right now, prioritize options to eliminate reduced barriers to encourage housing development. That's pretty broad. And I think that goal could be coming to us sort of piecemeal, but it also could become a broader discussion about prioritization and that we could, that this could be included in that kind of conversation. I just wanted to get a better understanding of where we're headed with that.
I think you're right that piecemeal. I don't think you mean, or I don't mean piecemeal in a pejorative sense, but yeah,
Right.
I think we are taking it in pieces.
Okay.
We do not have at this time, planned a kind of grand discourse on reduction of barriers and fees. Rather, we're trying to consider that obviously we just eliminated a fee 20 minutes ago. So it continues to happen and it isn't lost, but it isn't right. There's not one meeting out there on the horizon as of now when we would tackle that. It really is part of this.
Yeah, no, that's probably fine. I mean, if there is a discussion about prioritization, I think maybe we need to have that, but maybe we don't. If we can make sure that, everything that could be valuable to Healdsburg is going to be entered into the queue in a reasonable time frame.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think obviously we'll take our direction from the council on what pieces come. And I say there's not a large discussion kind of on cost planned right this minute. It might happen. It might collectively, we might decide that it needs to. One thing that's not lost on me is that as we continue to remove financial barriers and also look at a strain of our capacity in order to move these things forward, those are moving at cross purposes. And that tension might be something where we really do need to look at the totality of it. But at this point, obviously, we're continuing to try to get you each of these updates in packages that we think kind of make sense and can be bitten off.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Thank you. For AB 1287 that we're talking about tonight for the density law, that is for projects that are all 120% AMI and below. Is that correct? So it includes in the language moderate income and affordable. Is moderate like the category of 120% and below? Or is moderate, is that a term of art for technically affordable.
Yes, so moderate is 120% and below.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I think for me, and just to like with respect to what City Manager Kay said, I think we're doing a really great job, all things considered, building housing at 120% below AMI because of the work that's been happening thus far with Saggio Hills and Burbank at Dry Creek Road. And like we still know we have hundreds units more to build, but we're now in a place where we're building a disproportionate amount of deed restricted affordable units because it's the only thing that can be built, that and senior housing. And so I think we should be thinking more broadly about what are the other tools that we have to create market rate housing, because we are now basically the over 200 units that we're building in this cycle are either senior units at Enzo or all deed restricted affordable, and then 20 something units at 3 Healdsburg Avenue. That there's like very few in terms of like larger impact projects. So we have hundreds of deed restricted low, affordable units that are happening, which is wonderful. And I think, we're getting into compliance with AB 1287, but thinking about how can we be creative about building for sale market rate. It's like ADUs is the only avenue we have. Otherwise, we're just constrained by the growth management ordinance, and all of those units are allocated through large scale developments at Mill District and Montage and are not yielding housing that is accessible to your average plumber and a teacher, like the folks that want to have coach Little League. Not that people that live in Mill District also can't coach Little League, but this is maybe their third or fourth home. And so they're just not here that often to like get involved. Not to vilify, but like we're just not building housing for the middle income community. And so to look at what are the avenues for market rate housing in our town that are not at Mill District or Montage, because those are spoken for until 2030, 2035, 2031. So the only market rate housing that's getting built is at those large scale, beautiful, amazing developments that are happening, but like not middle class housing for people that want to live in Healdsburg. So I'm just asking that's why I think 1033 or other laws that we know we have like a really specific, unique constraints that we're living in this town with respect to housing. And so how we can prioritize the state laws that are coming forward, it's like we know we have our hands tied behind our back. We know that, and we know what's exempt from that ordinance that was passed. And so it's like, I think that's where we should be prioritizing whatever we can. 1287 is great, but like I don't think it's going to solve the problem we're in, unfortunately. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox. Thanks.
Yeah, I think you're stating a lot of the obvious, right, that we know. But do we have any further questions? No. Did I open this up to public comment already? I don't think I did. Okay, so I'll open this up to public comment. Anybody? I'm not seeing anybody. So bring it back to council for comments and or emotions. Ron? Chris? Sorry. We've got two separate
Right, two.
motions. Yeah.
Introduced for first reading by title only, waiving further reading of the text of ordinance amending Healdsburg Municipal Code, Title 20, Section 20.20.010, accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units, and Section 20.28.310, definitions to reflect changes in state ADU law.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes. And another
And I
one?
propose we introduce for the first reading by title only, waiving further reading of the text and ordinance amending Healdsburg Municipal Code, Title 20, Section 20.20.035, affordable housing incentives to reflect changes in state density bonus law.
Second.
A roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Ellen. Okay, so closing the public hearings. Now we're on to old business, fiscal year 2025-26 first quarter financial update. Finance Director Katie Edgar.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Katie Edgar, Finance Director here to present to you the first quarter financial update for fiscal year 25-26. Next slide, please. The proposed action tonight is to receive a presentation and adopt a resolution approving amendments to the fiscal year 25-26 budget. It is important to note that tonight's first quarter review is the first review of the second year in our adopted biennial budget. Being the second year of the two-year cycle, there are several revenue and expense adjustments proposed to realign the budget in context of updated trends. Next slide, please. Jumping right into the chart of general fund revenues, the first column represents the activity through the first quarter ending September 30th, 2025. The second column represents the total adopted budget, and next is the percentage of budget received in the first quarter, and then the final column represents the amendments proposed tonight. Overall, revenues received from July through September totaled just over $3 million, 16% of the adopted $19.3 million budget. Notably, this does not include the first disbursements of property tax or vehicle license fees, which account for about 28% of the adopted budget and will be received in December. Nor does this include the September disbursements of sales tax revenue expected later this month. The proposed amendments result in an increase to the adopted revenue budget of approximately $626,000. Reductions are proposed to sales tax revenue, franchise fees, and the Public Safety Augmentation Fund sales tax revenue to align with the current economic conditions and projected downward trends. These reductions are more than offset by increases across multiple sources. Notably, now that both dispensaries are operational within city limits, staff are proposing to budget cannabis business tax revenue for the first time. Additionally, development fees and permits, as well as restricted interest revenues, are trending well ahead of targets, with 58% and 61% of the budgeted revenues received through the first quarter. Intergovernmental revenues and charges for services revenues are also proposed to increase, driven largely by increased reimbursements associated with fire mutual aid and police state-mandated programs. Next slide, please. General fund expenses in the first quarter total $4.8 million, 25% of the adopted $19.3 million budget. While aggregate expenses appear on track, several departments, including legal, planning, fire, and public works, have experienced an increase in operational demands that require additional appropriations. The proposed increases in planning and fire are directly offset by related increases in revenues associated with permit fees and mutual aid reimbursements. The bulk of the appropriation increases, $750,000, is in the non-department category, which is intended to allocate the one-time savings from fiscal year 24-25 on non-recurring expenditures that improve the long-term fiscal health as the city, as outlined in the adopted surplus policy. Staff are proposing to allocate $250,000 to the long-range planning fund to continue building the foundation for future planning efforts, $250,000 to the building maintenance fund to address deferred facility maintenance need, and $250,000 to the Pension Stabilization Trust Fund to maximize interest earning potentials and provide further flexibility for future EUAL funding. Next slide, please. Looking at the fund balance chart for the general fund, the first column represents the unaudited actuals for the prior year, fiscal year 24-25. The middle column is the adopted budget for the current year, fiscal year 25-26. And the last budget is the last column is the revised budget for fiscal year 25-26, which includes all the amendments proposed tonight. Starting with the prior year, our revenues ended slightly higher than projected, and expenditures were significantly lower as a result of vacancies in key positions, including the Assistant City Manager, Utilities Director, and several positions in the Police Department. These positions have longer lead times to recruitment and resulted in a one-time savings. It is very important to note that in both the adopted budget for fiscal year 25-26 and the revised budget, the revenue and expenditures are structurally balanced, meaning the city is relying only on annual revenues to support ongoing operational programs, and the one-time savings are being allocated to one-time expenditures. Next slide, please. Community services revenue received in the first quarter totaled $2.3 million, or 27% of the adopted budget of $8.8 million. The first quarter TOT revenues were slightly lower than the seasonal trends, driven largely by September returns, which were the lowest that we've received in 4 years, and were largely due to low occupancy rates. Staff are not proposing any amendments at this time, but will continue monitoring TOT revenues as the newly constructed Appalachian Hotel has opened to visitors since mid-September. There are 2 amendments proposed tonight, totaling about $46,000 related to restricted interest revenues from the Pension Stabilization Trust Fund and contributions from Milestone for utility expenses at the Village Chanticleer. Next slide, please. Community services expenses totaled $2.2 million, 23% of the adopted $9.6 million budget. There are 4 amendments proposed to the expense budget totaling $133,000. These amendments include increases to utility services expenses in 3 separate divisions and increasing the Senior Center division budget to account for the remaining grant funding for the end-of-life program at the Senior Center. Next slide, please. Moving on to the Community Services Fund balance, in fiscal year 24-25, the city recorded additional interest earnings that increased the unallocated fund balance projections for the current fiscal year. It is also important to note that the current budget includes $1.16 million in capital expenditures that were rebudgeted from the prior year to support the ongoing Foley Family Community Pavilion project. The amendments proposed tonight address immediate operational needs, and the revised budget column reflects an unallocated fund balance of approximately $750,000. Staff are not proposing to allocate additional funding at this time, but are monitoring operational needs and the 2 major capital projects, the Saggio Hills Park project and their Badger Park redevelopment project, as they progress towards the construction phase and potentially require additional investments. Next slide, please. Moving on to the enterprise funds. Water utility rate revenue for the first quarter is slightly ahead of seasonal trends, and because of the recent completion of the municipal recycled water pipeline, the city is now receiving utility rate revenue associated with the sale of recycled water. Staff are proposing amendments to account for the additional revenues and a small increase to the budget for operating expenses associated with increased utility usage at water facilities. Overall, the net impact on the water fund is positive, and the revised budget reflects that both the operating reserve and the rate stabilization reserve targets will be fully funded. The estimated remaining working capital is just over $1 million. However, there are 2 large capital projects replacing water and wastewater utility infrastructure on Healdsburg Ave and Brown Street that are currently in design with anticipated construction shortfalls that will need additional capital contributions in the near future. Next slide, please. Utility rate revenues in the wastewater fund are trending in alignment with the projected budget, and the only proposed amendment tonight accounts for increased restricted interest earnings and increased utility services expenses. Overall, the net impact of the proposed amendments is negative, as shown by the decrease in the remaining working capital in the revised budget column. The wastewater fund is still projected to meet both the operating reserve and the rate stabilization reserve targets, with approximately $645,000 available to support additional capital needs as the aforementioned projects approach construction. Next slide, please. Utility rate revenues and expenses in the electric fund for the first quarter are trending in alignment with the projected budget, and the only proposed amendment tonight accounts for increased restricted interest earnings. Therefore, I'd like to direct your attention to the components of fund balance at the bottom of the chart in front of you. The electric fund is currently projected to fully fund the 50% reserve target and the $4 million capital reserve, with an additional $2.2 million in remaining working capital. This additional working capital largely reflects the revenue received from the sale of renewable energy credits in the prior fiscal year. Several months ago, staff presented to council multiple options for deploying these funds in different projects and initiatives. One of those options included potential additional funding for Grove Street and Healdsburg Ave undergrounding projects. As the Grove Street project gets closer to construction, estimates continue to indicate that additional funding will likely be required. However, staff will return to council at a later date to further discuss the deployment of these funds. Next slide, please. As a reminder, the proposed action is to approve amendments to the fiscal year 25-26 budget, and a full list of the proposed amendments is included in the agenda packet. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for that. That's a lot of good information. Any questions from council? No, Chris?
Can you
just briefly go over what's covered in the general fund expenses category, non-departmental?
Yes, that is a great question. So the non-departmental category includes several things. It includes the transfers out from the general fund. So that would be any transfers, for example, to the streets fund or to any other funds that we have, the capital replacement fund for the general fund. General capital replacement fund, as well as it includes the overhead expenses, which is actually revenue coming in from other departments. So every year we do a cost allocation plan that it components of the general fund services that support other departments. So things like the finance department, city clerk's office, as well as the legal services. So all these costs that accumulate in the general fund, but are not solely supporting general fund activities. They are supporting other activities like the enterprise funds and community services. They all reimburse the general fund for their portions of those services. And so it is a net in the general fund, in the non-departmental category, which is why you see that as a negative number. More oftentimes that reimbursement is higher than the transfers we're making out of the general fund.
Thank you.
Questions? Go ahead.
So I'm reviewing the recommendation around with the surplus from our reduced expenditures from last fiscal year and the proposed sweeping of the funds towards those three categories. General plan update or, future land use planning, building maintenance fund, and pension stabilization trust fund. I support the move. I'm looking at our within the staff report, the charts, and I'm wondering where we see that $750,000 shift.
Yeah, so that's in the expenses by department, the non-departmental category. That chart, if you're looking at the exhibit, it should be the attachment 1, I believe, that shows your general fund departments. And that proposed amendment will be in the column all the way on the far right. And in that non-departmental category, that's where you'll see the $750,000.
So it's not in any of the tables that are in the staff report?
No.
Okay, great. Then that's exactly why I couldn't find it there. Fantastic. And then wondering for the legal services, I see that we're making that $250,000 increase. Can you talk about, per what you just said, about how we're going to reimburse other departments or other departments reimburse the general fund? What do we know kind of yet what that looks like? Is there a typical, majority comes from community services or majority comes from the water department, or it depends kind of year by year?
So it definitely depends year by year. I misspoke earlier. I said we do it every year. We actually do it as part of the budget process. So it is every 2 years that we do that. We do a true up mid-cycle sometimes if there are large variances that we see, but most of the time we just do it every 2 years. And so it is based on both the size of the operating budget and the amount of employees that each department has as to how that allocation gets spread. So for example, community services does have a lot of part-time employees, but they're not count as a full-time employee. So they do have a very large budget in context of some of the other funds. They definitely do receive a good portion of that, but it is spread evenly based on the proportionate size of the budget.
Thanks.
So the allocations are based on the size of the budget for each department. Do you also take head count and that kind of things? I mean, you've got a whole formula in there, right?
Yes,
Okay.
It is a whole formula that is done every 2 years, and it is a look back. So it's incorporated in the budget, and we will look back on actual expenditures, and then we will allocate those based on the actual expenditures of the internal service departments, and then allocate that on the actual expenditures of the external departments.
Got it. Okay. And so we have the one-time funds that we're going to use, and that was because we were allocating to one-time expenditures, and that was due to primarily employees that weren't in place yet. right?
Yes, we had a lot of salary savings. So when we developed the budget, assuming that all staff that are authorized by city council will be filled. And when we do have turnover throughout the year, especially in, executive level positions, they do result in sometimes significant savings.
Got it. That's great. Well, it's not really great, but I mean, we'll take it. Yeah, right. So then the enterprise funds too now seem to have really turned around. I assume that's a lot with our rate change structure. And it looks like there's money left over for some capital projects that we're going to allocate probably in the next budget. Would that be the plan if it's still there?
Yes, that is absolutely, depending on the timing of these major projects that I mentioned, hitting construction, some of them will hit construction before we wrap up the next planning cycle for budget. And so if we need to, we will come back at time of construction award to allocate additional funds for those. If they don't reach that timing before budget, they will likely be incorporated into the budget process.
Okay. And then I do notice, so a lot of our revenue is generated obviously by TOT and sales tax. So, and both of those are trending downward, it seems a little bit. So, can you talk to that? What you're seeing out there? Is it just a drop in tourism? Is it car sales? What's driving that?
Yeah, so interestingly, transient occupancy tax is actually on the slow rise. We did see from, I believe it was 23 and 24, we had a decline, but we have seen in the last fiscal year, we were about a 1% increase year over year, and we're continuing to trend towards a little bit of an increase on the transient occupancy tax side. However, the sales tax did show a 1% year over year decline last year, and we're projecting a 2% year over year decline in the current year. There's several driving factors to that. Car sales is absolutely one of our major revenue sector generators for sales tax. However, we also are just seeing a decline in the restaurant industry, which we're seeing as the other main sector that we have, is just declining slightly. A lot of it is larger economic conditions that are not specific to Healdsburg. We're just seeing people on the whole being less being more frugal with their discretionary spending. And a lot of that discretionary spending is seen on high-end meals and other types of those kind of niche markets that we have here.
Great, thank you. If we have no further questions, no? Open this up to public comment. Not seeing anyone come forward. Bring it back, and there's no action required. This is is there? Oh, no, there is. We have to approve the changes.
Yes, adopt a resolution approving the amendments to the budget.
I make a motion to adopt a resolution approving amendment to the fiscal year 2025-26 adopted budget.
Second.
A roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes. Thank you, Katie. Okay, so now we go to, I think, Councilmember Edwards probably next on the appointment to the Arts and Culture Commission. And, City Clerk Allen.
Good evening. I do not have a formal presentation for you this evening. The action is to appoint one applicant to the Arts and Culture Commission for a term due to expire January 1st of 2028.
Councilmember Edwards.
All right, I met Councilman Hagley and I both interviewed both candidates, and they were really good, strong candidates. We were both really impressed with their knowledge of even our retail art, how it's included in our retail, the range of art that we have. We also wanted to let them know that there was talk about the commitment, and a 4-year commitment is a long term for somebody in high school. So we wanted to let them know not to feel stressed over that, but to keep us informed if there were any changes that needed to come forward on that. And so with that, we made a decision and we want to encourage people to keep trying. So we came up with, let me get this here. We recommend Camilla Rauda for the commission.
Okay. Talk about that a little bit. Where'd you come up with that?
She was just really extremely strong on aware of how art fits into different areas of our community, whether it be music on the plaza, whether it be a bracelet in a retail operation, and how how she sees it through her eyes in the community of living here her whole life, of really being able to look at the different areas of how the culture can be added and improved, and a variety of cultures, not just the major ones, but our Native American culture, Latino culture, and really was just impressed with her awareness of all the different areas that art can touch our community, and wanting to really be involved in bringing a new set of eyes that are slightly different than what we've seen. And it was kind of interesting when we were talking about conflicts of art projects coming forward, because it wasn't really an issue, but she was able to really look and understand how that can affect some of the other members applying for the commission. So just the overall awareness was just amazing in this candidate, and we both were blown away.
Thank you for that. Do you have any comments from council?
They both just seemed like really well-rounded candidates who have a lot of bright, exciting future ahead for sure. And I appreciate, what you said. And it seems like this applicant's background will be really helpful. And it looks like they'll be able to hit the ground running too, given that they've been able to already be on the Commission on the Status of Women as the junior commissioner, and those kinds of things I think will be helpful, and someone being able to walk into this role and be successful. So,
and I also want to add credit to Linus, who has really done a good job in encouraging students to participate in their community. And I think that that's not just for this commission, but it shows that we have, a strong bench, as they say, of people who want to participate in our community. And I wanted to give a thanks for him for instilling that in students. It's really important.
Thank you. Chris?
Not too much to add. That's really exciting. I just want to show some appreciation to the commission and to the community, I think, who are open to having a youth commissioner on the commission. And I think that's really going to serve a valuable function in this particular work that they're doing. So it's going to be a neat, it's going to be a really exciting new era for that commission. I mean, they're just starting really and growing, but this will begin a new chapter that's going to be fun to see.
Great, thank you. So do we vote? I assume we vote on this, pardon me? Public comment first, thank you. Open this up to public comment. Okay, not seeing anyone come forward. Now we vote, right? Would someone like to make a motion?
I can make a motion to appoint Camilla Rauda to the Arts and Culture Commission.
Second.
A roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ron and David out there in TV land. So appreciate that, because I know it takes time and effort to interview everyone. So that's really great to do. So, okay, we'll move on to new business. The 2025 California Fire Code and California Wildland Urban Interface, WUI Code with local amendments, Fire Marshal Division Chief Lance McDonald.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Mayor Mitchell and council member. How are you guys doing?
Good.
I'm here for the 2025 California Fire Code, and let me go on to the next slide, please. So tonight's recommended action, there's two of them: to conduct the first reading by title only of the ordinance adopting the 2025 California Fire Code and the 2025 Wildland Urban Interface, or WUI Code, with the local amendments, and then also to repeal the current ordinance. Next slide, please. So the code adoption process, this is a similar process you guys have just witnessed with the building code, obviously. And this year, an interesting thing happened with AB 130, which is a budget trailer bill that took place in California that requires local fire codes to stay the same for the foreseeable future. And so it really limits on the amount of changes we could make. We can adopt any existing ordinances that we had, and then obviously update the code sections and cycles. But other than that, on the residential side, keeping it mostly the same. And this city adoption follows our triennial cycle directed by the state of California. So as always, we try to be very collaborative in Sonoma County, and us as fire marshals throughout the county work together for the past few months to try to make sure that our codes are consistent with each other. It makes it less challenging for builders when they go from building in Windsor to building in Healdsburg, that we have at least similar type of ordinances along with our fire codes. And so the goal is obviously to maintain regional consistency and minimize the variations between the jurisdictions. So the city of Healdsburg's local amendments have been reviewed, confirmed, and remain consistent with countywide recommendations. And so the big question is what's actually changed? Well, the short answer is not much, but the bulk of the requirements do remain intact. And then one thing that has changed is the new WUI code consolidates the prior fire and building code chapters into its own code cycle. And code sections and numbers obviously are updated as well as the local ordinance remained the exact same other than the references to the new fire code. So no additions have made to that. And so again, tonight's two recommended actions are to conduct the first reading and then also to repeal the previous ordinance. And with that, I'll entertain any questions.
Thank you. Council have any questions? Chris?
I sort of detected maybe a bit of frustration with AB 130 restricting the ability to change certain parts of the code. Did I read you wrong there, or do you feel like there's something specific that we're going to have trouble adapting to or changing in the future?
No, I don't think that there were enough changes in the code cycle that made too much frustration. What I will say is that we always try to review. We have every 3 years to do this, and we take kind of copious notes. And are there things that, as technologies change, for instance, lithium batteries, that kind of things that we may have to, have a better eye on, or potentially could update on a local ordinance perspective. And so that's part of the process since the beginning of time. And so this year that didn't happen for us. And so I don't know if it's frustration, but it's different part of the process. I understand the reasoning behind it. The reasoning is frankly housing to encourage more development and less restriction on housing. So I appreciate that and understand that.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No? So I'll open this up to public comment. Not seeing anyone, I'll bring it back. Would you like to make the motion this time? What? I was actually looking at Chris, but that's okay.
I have to find it.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
You want me to help you, or you go?
No, you got it. I just was.
I move to adopt an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg repealing ordinance number 1218 and adopting by reference the 2025 edition of the California Fire Code as amended.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? I apologize. Do we have to, City Attorney, do we have to have a date as well for the second reading? I believe that's on there. I apologize.
Yes, you should have a date for a second reading. And also, did you waive?
I'm going to read the whole.
Did you? You don't need to read the whole thing. Did you
Introduce
waive?
for first reading by title only, waiving further reading of the text of an
That's
ordinance of the City Council of Healdsburg repealing ordinance number 1218 and adopting by reference the 2025 California Fire Code, Part 9, Title 24, and the 2025 California Wildland Urban Interface Code, Part 2.5, Title 24, together with reaffirmed local amendments necessary due to Healdsburg's local climatic, geological, and topographical conditions.
And Councilmember Kelly, perhaps your motion would include setting a public hearing.
Oh, I thought I had to do it separately, but I also moved to set a public hearing on adoption of the there's a space between the two. So usually that's an indication to do
I
them
apologize.
separately.
Not on the same page here. That's our bad.
Okay, so do them separately? Yes, I'm going to do them separately. I'm going to make that motion and wait for my second.
I'll second that.
And then we'll have a roll call vote on it.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod.
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell.
Yes.
I also move to set a public hearing on adoption of the ordinance for December 1st, 2025, and publish notice of the public hearing in accordance with Government Code Section 50022.3 and 6066.
I'll second that.
Roll call vote on that one.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod.
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for working through that. Appreciate you guys.
Appreciate your presentation. Okay, and now new business 9B, revenue options for infrastructure and road repair, Assistant City Manager April Mitz.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Mitchell and council members. The good news is this is informational only. There's no action tonight. So I'm clearing you of having to do any action on this item. Next slide. So quick background on this item, why it's in front of you tonight, is the city has recognized that we will have funding gaps in the future to provide critical infrastructure, whether it's our streets program or facilities. An example in the staff report and in front of you on the slide tonight is our streets, and it's our current PCI, so our pavement condition index. This went to City Council in August as an informational item, and this is a quick recap. Right now, we're currently at 69 is what our PCI is. If we do nothing, we don't invest any other money over 5 years, it drops down to 60. If we do 1.75 million per year on average, it will stay at 69. So that's just to keep status quo where we're at. If we increase the contribution to 3 million a year, we could get up to 74 for our PCI. If we do an average of $4.8 million per year over a 5-year period, we can actually increase it to 80. Again, this is with a big caveat is that's over a 5-year period. And it also assumes that we have staffing to be able to do that. So that's, I just want to make sure we're looking at the flip side. It's just not the money, it's also the capacity. Or if we stay on our current projection, right now is $1.44 million per year. So that's budgeted in the current 5-year CIP. So if you look at the 5-year CIP, which is about $7.2 million, our PCI would actually decrease to 67. So that's just an example of the street section, the street side of the equation, where if we don't put more investment in our streets, we will see our PCI continue to deteriorate. And that's something that we do through the budget process, is just determining how much we can allocate to that. On the other side is our facilities. We are currently in the process of doing a space utilization and facilities condition assessment for both our police and fire departments. So City Council authorized that study in March of this year. We are currently underway. We should have the final report to City Council probably sometime right after the new year. So in 2026, we're expecting to bring it back. We know that we have Measure H funds that could be used for the fire department side of it. Granted, we know those funds can only go so far. We can't use them for everything. So we have a little bit of dedicated funding for the fire department. However, for the police department, we don't have any dedicated funding source. In addition to that, in 2020, there was a space utilization as well as a facilities assessment for all community services buildings. And those items, little by little, things have been put in the budget. I know as we can afford them, obviously everything that is included in that study, we cannot actually we cannot pay for things to be able to get our facilities up to a space where we might need them to be. And so based on that information, Council did adopt as one of their goals this fiscal year is to just explore revenue for infrastructure and road repair. So that's what this report is in front of you tonight, is just looking at different options that the council might want to consider in the future if we actually want to invest a little more funds into our infrastructure and facilities. Next slide. So there's 3 basic options that we're going to look at tonight. One is taxes. The second is debt issuance. Debt is not revenue, but it's just finding ways to be able to pay for some of these things. And then the other category is very small, but it's our charges, fees, and rates. Next slide. So a little bit, so this information is just on taxes. These are just general considerations. There's 2 different types of taxes that do need to go to the voters, either a general tax or a special tax. A general tax can be used for any general purposes and goes directly into the city's general fund. In order for that to pass, you do need a 50% plus one vote. So it's just a simple majority that goes to the voters, but it does have to take place at an election where city council seats are on the ballot. So you really are limited to November election timeframe on that. There is a caveat. It can go to voters at a different time if a fiscal emergency is declared by city council. That is an entirely separate process. We are definitely not there. I want to put that out there. We are not in a fiscal emergency, but there is a caveat where you can bring it to the voters at a different time, but it's under a fiscal emergency status. And then we have a special tax. A special tax does also go to the voters. It requires 2/3 of the vote approval. So it's a 66.67. So it's a little higher threshold, but it can be taken to the voters at any time. Perfect example of a special tax that we currently have is Measure L, which is community services, the 10% for TOT, and then also Measure S, which is a 2% TOT specifically for affordable housing. So if it's a special tax, it has a very specific designated purpose, and that is a higher threshold for voter passage. There is another type of special tax, and that is a voter initiative. So if the voters put something on the ballot, that can be taken to the voters at any time. And because it's a voter initiative, it's only the simple majority, the 50% plus one threshold. So that's a little real quick primer on taxes. And now we're going to dive into different annual revenue potential that could be derived from taxes. Again, I want to put this with a caveat, and our director, Edgar, would definitely correct me if I don't say this. These are very general assumptions. If city council wanted staff to look into diving deeper in any one of these little areas, you would see a little bit of variance, but this is just very overview generalities. The methodology behind all of these is included in more detail in the staff report. So a transactions and use tax. So that is something, one of the implementation considerations that we just need to be aware of right now is that right now the cap is at 12.25%. The city is currently at a 9.75% rate, so we're below that cap. However, it's a county-wide, and I know I'm going to get the terminology incorrect on this, but it is county-wide right now. If a city or county wants to go up to that cap of 12.25%, it has to have gone to the voters and approved by January 1st, 2026. So we know we are not going to be meeting that deadline for it. So we really are limited to the amount that we're at right now of 9.75%. If we want to go higher than that 9.75%, it can be done. It would require voter approval, and it would also require approval by the Attorney General. So just want to throw that caveat out there. If those things were to take place, just for illustration purposes, an additional 0.5 cent would bring us approximately $2.7 million a year in additional revenue. So it is something that if later on down the line, council does want to look at, it's something that we might want to look at going through that process. The next is the business license tax. One of the considerations is we could look at increasing the tax, but we also might want to consider the current business and financial environment. As our Director Ager reported earlier, right now sales tax is on a little bit of a decline. So if you start increasing the amount of taxes businesses are paying, it might be something to consider, as well as if we were to implement another increase in the business license tax, we might need some additional administrative help during the time of implementation, more to get the word out and making sure that everybody is actually paying the right tax. For illustration purposes, if we increase our current business license tax by 50%, it's about $132,000 a year. So it's pretty minimal amount if we were just to increase it by 50%, but it at least gives you an idea of what brings in the greatest amount of revenue. A real property transfer tax is another option. One of the things to consider in order to implement a real property transfer tax, right now there's a countywide tax of $1.10 per $1,000 of real property transferred. The city gets half of it. The cities get 55 cents of that 1,000, and then the other 55 cents stays with the county. If cities want to implement any additional real property transfer tax, the city would have to become a charter city. So the city could go with a full charter, which is about a 18-month to a 2-year process, or you can do a limited charter, which really just focuses on the ability for a city to actually be able to implement a real property transfer tax above and beyond that 55 cents per 1,000. One of the things to consider is, in order for the city to implement the real property transfer tax, you would have to have 2 different measures on the ballot. One would be to be a charter city, one would have to be to implement a real property transfer tax, and both of them would have to pass. So there is a lot of voter confusion surrounded about that. It's a very complicated process, but want to make you aware that it is an option. But you typically would get pushback from the real estate community, because it's something that what happens is it's 1% on the total value of the sale of the house. So for illustrative purposes, if the city were to implement a 1%, which is essentially $10 per $1,000 of the sale value of real property, it's approximately $2.5 million per year that could be raised. But again, it's one of the more difficult ones to get passed, because we have the dual component of becoming a charter city as well. The next is the user utility tax. And so this is a tax that's imposed on utility services. The rate really does vary per household and per use of utilities. So there is a chart that is included in the staff report, but again, for illustrative purposes only, if we're looking at a 1% utility tax, it's approximately $300,000 per year. And if the council wants us to look further into that, we can get into the nuances of what type of utility we're looking at taxing, and that amount would fluctuate. The next is a transient occupancy tax. One of the considerations is you have potential pushback from local hotels, although this tax is generally approved by voters. But the Healdsburg also has the highest rate in the county right now. So some considerations. But for every 1% in TOT, the city would generate approximately $770,000 per year annually. Cannabis tax. So as reported on earlier, this is a brand new tax to the city. We are just getting our feet wet and finding out what we're bringing in on this one. The city council does have authority up to 8%. Currently, right now, the city council charges 4% on retail, 0 on retail for medical purposes, and then 2% on distribution and manufacturing. So the city council could go up to 8% in any of those categories via resolution. However, if one of the considerations, if council does want to increase that, it may drive customers to other cities, local cities around us. But for instance, if we double it, we're looking at about $137,000 a year on that, based on our current estimates. Parcel tax, again, for illustrative purposes, it's a per parcel flat tax. And based on the parcels that we have here in the city limits of 4,920, if we did a flat rate of $50 per parcel, it'd be about $246,000 per year. And then assessment districts is another option that we can do, and that is a specific geographical area that receives the benefit. This does require property owner approval, and it's 50% plus 1 for property owner approval. It may take more than a year to implement, and the amount really does vary on what type of assessment district you're looking at. So next slide. So that was a whole lot on taxes. So those are various options the city council may want to consider at some point. The next category is debt issuance. Again, this does not raise revenue, but it just gives options for city council to be able to fund specific projects. So the first option is a general obligation bond, or a GO bond. Again, it's intended to fund a special project. It does require 2/3 voter approval, because it is for a very designated purpose for the projects. This is something that can be taken to voters at any time. And just for a matter, just straight example on this one, there are definitely a lot of nuances when you issue GO bonds. But if you were to issue a GO bond, or take a GO bond to the members of the public for voting approval, a $20 million project over 4 years or 30 years at a 4% interest rate, you're looking at an average of $29 per 100,000 of assessed value annually for the term of the loan. Typically, when you don't issue the $20 million at one point, you might do 3 different tranches. So that amount's going to fluctuate, but just for illustrative purposes, that's what you're looking at. It is important to note the difference of assessed valuation as opposed to market value. When you're looking at the real property transfer tax, that is a tax on the actual transaction itself. So it's the market value of the real property. When you're looking at the general obligation bond, it is the assessed value of the property. So when a property changes hands, the assessed value is recorded with the county. The assessed value is limited to how much it can increase each year. So even though a market value of a house might be $2.5 million, depends on when the person bought the house, the assessed value of the property might be much lower than that. So I just want to make sure that you know the distinction between the assessed valuation and then the market value. General obligations bonds is off of the assessed valuation. So I want to make that distinction. The other option is a lease revenue bond. And again, it is intended to fund specific projects. This does not require voter approval. So this is something that City Council could authorize with a majority vote. The borrowing is limited to the insured value of essential city assets. And right now we have enough of a buffer where we're able to do that. The repayment for this would be from the general fund. And if you utilize the same scenario where with the $20 million debt financed over 30 years at a 4% interest rate, your annual debt service would be about $1.2 million for the general fund. So again, does not need voter approval, but you have a much higher rate that you're paying per year out of the general fund. Next slide. So this is the other category, which is charges, fees, and rates. So these are imposed on an individual for service that the person chooses to receive. And so these are generally not considered a tax, so they can be implemented by a majority of the governing board for approval. But also it has to be reasonably related to the cost of service or impact on this one. And so what the city does is we go through several studies, whether it's a nexus study, where it really does let the council and the public know what the maximum amount that you can actually charge. The city council has discretion to set rates lower based on maybe a cost recovery philosophy that's been implemented. However, we can only charge the maximum that is shown in these nexus studies. One example that you might have a cost recovery philosophy on is recreational programs. So maybe if you have a certain recreational program, the cost to deliver the program is $200 per person, but for affordability, council has a philosophy to set it much lower to make it available for a broader audience. You also have development impact fees that council can set. You have permitting fees, and then you have the rates that are set through a Prop 218 process, which would be your water, wastewater, electric utilities. Next slide. So the recommended action tonight, there is none. Again, this is for informational purposes only. At this point, the staff is not making a recommendation to move forward with any of these. It was just really putting the information out there for the council and for the public to see what options are available whenever we get to the point that we really want to look at funding some of these things, where if we want to get greater PCI, or if we want to be able to do a lot more improvements to city civic facilities. So based on that, I will answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. That was great, sort of accounting 101 for cities, right? Thank you. Do we have questions from council? No? Ariel?
With respect to the, so we talked about PCI and roads, and then we talked about some of the capital improvement needs, especially fire station and police. For the police department, if we were to issue, do we have the same kind of fund concerns with respect to like what we could bond against if we were to go down a bonding route for upgrading the police station down the road? We only can bond against like certain funds that would be out. So you can only bond against the general fund because that's what funds police. Is that right? City Manager Kay, I don't know who's.
So for lease revenue bonds, what happens is that you can only borrow as much as your essential city services or your essential city facilities allow you to. So let's say for insurance purposes, if all of our net value of our properties, essential services, which is considered police, fire, corporation yard typically, but you can really only, you basically pledge that saying, we're going to pay this back. If we don't pay the money back, then basically we're forfeiting that property. So it's just like, it's like a loan on a house.
Okay.
Yeah. And so from what I know, and Katie can probably confirm, we're pretty far below that debt limit right now because we don't have a whole lot of debt issued on our essential city facilities.
And I would just add to that, and then how you, obviously, it's not our intent that anybody would ever come and take our corporation yard for default. That won't happen, but we would, if it's a police facility, yes, the general fund would be the logical and probably the only repayment fund source. So year by year, as you pay the debt service, that's where it's coming from.
So you couldn't, for example, use TOT that funds community services to repay the debt service on borrowing against the police, like police department.
Correct. As it actually ties back nicely to this, as you heard, that's a special tax that was passed for a specific purpose. So I occasionally go and look up our various special taxes and look at what are the allowed uses. And that one's pretty specific.
Okay.
And it doesn't say police or police facilities.
Great. And so I think one of the reasons I wanted us to be able to have this conversation was just looking at our PCI. I know we hear from time to time from different pockets of the community when people come forward with a roadway specific concern, and it's like you want to respond like in the moment, like what's on the agenda, it's on the capital improvement, plan, but thinking about how do we stay out in front of that cash outlay, just knowing how limited our revenue is, and then just analyzing, especially for the roadway improvements. Like I feel like right now we're really lucky. Well, I don't know if Larry feels lucky, but we've got a lot of projects coming down the pipeline, and we are getting a lot of grant funds from outside the city to do those big roadway projects. And now, of course, they're like coming in hot and heavy, and it's gonna be really busy getting those done. But what, besides those grant funds that are so competitive and really, like, especially in certain economic climates with federal dollars or state dollars, if those faucets of funds are not flowing towards these local grant programs for roads, we're really limited in what we can go out and like the money we can find that's specific to roads. And so, but we know that there's a need, and we know that if we don't stay on top of it, we're going to get like the wave of like, you have to stay out in front of it or else it just gets more and more expensive, and then you're just like chasing your tail. And so I was surprised that it wasn't one of the things that you guys proposed, and I'm curious if this is something that has been considered, something related to cars, right? Because cars are or trucks is what impacts the roads, like parking fees or something along those lines, where the cars that are making the roads impacted is what we're actually using as a potential revenue source to fix the roads. Is that something that was looked at or considered?
I did not consider it in this staff report. In the past, I know we have looked at parking fees, and they were, from what I recall from reading, it was an older study, they were pretty minimal. Something if council directs us to, we can definitely look into that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think in the longer term, it is a revenue source. And you'll recall we talked about this, two or so years ago in the context of the climate strategy. Having launched a parking program before, and for that, you're going to pay enough in prep work and equipment in the first few years. That I think the revenue is going to be negligible, if not negative. If you're looking at the long game, I think there's a world in which you can implement something like that and start to see something in the six figures. And to put it in this context, that kind of helps you kind of put it on that chart. Low to mid six figures is a rough guess based on what I've seen that we've looked at before. But that would take some time to realize that. Whether or not there's a political appetite for that, you all, I think, can answer that question and have contemplated it. It's tricky for sure, but I understand the logic to it. There's a nexus there.
And then the one thing that I had never contemplated and wasn't really sure what other cities were doing, so it was really helpful to see that utility use tax, and surprised to see that cities like Cloverdale and others have gone down that road. For the utility use tax, like say, for example, we're taxing something like internet usage or some other, is that like cable, internet, whatever? Can we use those funds for any purpose, or they have to be like, there has to be a direct correlation or connection?
If I'm remember it correctly, and I'm also going to look to Katie over there, I believe it is a general use on that one. I have the affirmative nod. Thank you.
How does a utility use tax get implemented? Like the council could decide we are interested in doing internet, phone, and cable as a category or something?
Yes, and then it would go to the voters for approval.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions? Vice Mayor?
Was a really great presentation. It really does kind of give us a great overview of revenue for the city in a sort of general way. And I just, I think you've covered this, but it seems like a lot of this information, it really would be applicable to any sort of interest that we had to in the city for something we'd want to improve, not just roads. I mean, that was the impetus here, but it has that sort of general application. And so I appreciate that. And correct me if I'm wrong about that too. But the main thing I just wanted to comment on is that, as this was coming in, I was kind of wondering if there's going to be something that popped out as being like, oh, that's really something we have not really looked at that we could jump in and it's really attractive to the community, but I'm not getting that impression that everything here is somewhat problematic and a hard sell and so on. And so, that being said, I'm kind of curious what the other council members are thinking in terms of this array of options, as far as, what could provide some potential for us in the future. If there's anything here that's that does seem to kind of stand out.
I'll wait till after public comment.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and open it up to public comment. And seeing no one, I'll bring it back. So go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, I want to give him a chance to speak. I think we're really at an interesting time right now that we are able to slowly chip away at some things, not the way we want, but the business climate, everything we're talking about, affordability is the big thing right now. And I think it'd be kind of crushing to hear that some people's lifeline is the internet and to know that we'd be taxing that. Right. I'm just talking at this particular time. And this was an exercise for us to have an idea of what we can do going forward. But I think that my thinking is waiting until everybody's feeling better, because we're not all feeling good. We heard about people getting food from our food bank. So when I think it's just not responsible really at this particular moment to make a move on anything. I think it's great to understand how little or how much these things impact. And I think if we're, to gain $137,000 a year or low six figures for what pain that would be right now on some members of our community, I think it's better to keep this as an informational event.
Good.
Yeah, that's a great point. Timing is really important, and the big piece here is just economic development in the general sense. If if the economy is better, our local businesses are doing better, then of course that's going to help us funnel money to whatever we want to do. And so maybe that's the bigger, broader question. It's not something we're ever ignoring as a council or as a community, or certainly the business community is always trying to do well. So there's always momentum there, but it's important to realize that that's kind of the groundwork for anything that we can accomplish as a city.
Yeah, I know we had talked a while back about doing a bond potential for the Somersault Park, and we kind of came off of that and said, no, that's not a good idea right now. So I agree with that. The affordability is an important issue. Also, it seems like a lot of what you've provided to us tonight are kind of big, heavy lifts for the city to try to do to raise funds, and some of it not very much, right? I mean, I definitely wouldn't wait. The business tax, I think that's what you were referring to, like $137,000 is, you know, nothing in the grand scheme of things for the city, right? So we need, and the gas tax, right, Measure T funds are what we're using, I believe, to do a lot of the road work. So I'm presuming those are down, considering we have so many electric vehicles on the road these days. So I'm not quite sure there's got to be some fix for that, I think, in you know, where people who are using those vehicles on our roads aren't paying road tax. So I'm not quite sure what kind of hole that's created. I keep looking at Larry, he knows, but yeah, can you mind talking about that?
You are completely right. Gas tax has steadily gone down. There is some talk about a highway user tax, which would cover electric vehicles. I haven't heard that it's very far along, that there's really a plan at this point.
Yeah, that seems like a big overlooking the obvious, right? Cars using the road, they're not paying any tax now.
There is a lot of talk about it. Every city is going through the same thing. With very few exceptions, where the gas tax is just not enough to cover anything really.
Okay. And I know we've looked at parking fees in the past, and it really sets everybody's hair on fire in town. I'm not sure that's a good approach either. I would have a hard time with that one, but did you have more comments? No? Yeah, go ahead.
I agree. I mean, I know that it's definitely a hot button issue to talk about paid parking in some context, whether that's the city owned lot, having that be a metered lot, not parking meters, but arms that go up and down and you pay a ticket when you go in and out, or doing metered parking around downtown. Or exempting locals from metered parking by having a sticker program. I think there's definitely, technology has advanced enough where if we wanted to create some revenue from people driving in town to fix our roads, there's a way to do it that doesn't impact locals in the same way that it would visitors. And possibly that's something that I think there'd be an appetite for in the community, just like we have TOT that people are comfortable approving on the ballot because locals are not paying TOT, but it certainly is benefiting the city. But that said, per City Manager Kay's comments, it's not going to be something that's going to be revenue positive for a while. And even then, is it, the implementation of that type of program, it's probably not the biggest bang for our buck. I was surprised to see cities like Cloverdale and Sebastopol with their utility tax. Like Cloverdale is accruing $570,000 a year. Sebastopol has $850,000 a year coming in from that tax. And Santa Rosa is over $14 million, obviously a much bigger city. But again, to Councilmember Edwards' point, who is that taxing and who is that impacting in our community? And I think when we have a community like Healdsburg and what City Manager Kay was talking about before about what percentage and number of households are leveraging free food because they are struggling right now, I think a fee or a tax that is equally spread across everyone in our community, when we know that in a lot of conversations, Healdsburg is very much a tale of two cities. And so I think we do have a lot of affluence in our community, and we also know we have a great deal of poverty in our community. And so I think especially as we are seeing, if we don't continue to stay on top of funding our road improvements, it's going to become more and more expensive. And I think the community will be very much up in arms. Like, number one, before you do anything else, fix the potholes is like what you hear time and again at cocktail parties. And so I just want to, mention that right now we're not funding it enough to stay afloat. We are funding it below what the minimum required is. If we stay the status quo per Assistant City Manager Myth, we would go from a PCI of 69 down to a 67 if we just do what we're doing now. So we're already falling behind with what we're doing. So I feel like we're making the community aware of that and also figure out what are the ways in which we could navigate, forward and trying to find more money to fund it. If it's not something directly correlated with cars or driving, which to me makes a ton of sense since those are the folks, using the roads and making the roads less, more expensive to fix, then I think we should be considering a revenue option. And of course, like none of this would happen overnight. All of these things, if everything we do takes years and years and years to move forward. So I, want to respect your comments of like, this is certainly not a good time to be talking about raising revenue in any way. But I would hate to do what our forefathers did, which was nothing around the water rates for years. And then all of a sudden we were in like a water rate catastrophe because we kept it status quo for a long time. And then we had to raise things pretty drastically because we were getting behind, and found ourselves in this really terrible situation with the water department. So I wonder if we want to like give some sort of, my thought would be, I do think we have to look at other revenue sources than what we currently have, given that sales tax is flat, TOT is flat, and we are going to have other capital needs that come up just in a city that's aging in this way, and our infrastructure is aging this way. There's always going to be some unforeseen expense, while we know that every single year we have to keep paying for road repair. So my thought would be to look at what are the ways, that if we were to look at something and continue this conversation over the next 2, 5, 10 years, however long it takes for the city to move forward, because that's the pace at which we typically move unless it's an emergency. My recommendation would be that we look for revenue sources that don't impact our low-income residents, that this is not something where I wouldn't want to see us increase sales tax. I already think our sales tax is high. I don't think we should increase our business tax for the reasons you guys said. I don't think we should be looking at, while a utility fee is interesting because it looks like our neighboring cities of similar size have found it to be, a pretty meaty amount of money, $570,000 in Cloverdale per year, $850,000 per year in Sebastopol. That's a sizable amount of money. But again, it's impacting everybody, including those who use the internet as a lifeline. So I don't know what the options are to really try to get at the heart of what wouldn't impact people who are already struggling to stay afloat while also being, prudent and financially sound and looking towards like a bigger something impactful down the road. And then to Mayor Mitchell's point, we don't want to spin our wheels on something that's not going to yield that much money, because why waste the staff time and the amount of resource on something that's not going to actually move the needle for something substantial. So with that, I don't have a direct ask or recommendation other than I feel like it wouldn't be prudent to do nothing.
Vice Mayor?
Well, you kind of answered my question, because the one option that you didn't bring up in that list of things that had problems, or, especially in terms of having impact on low-income residents, is the transfer tax. So that one, first of all, has the greatest revenue potential on the list, except for the sales tax increase, which I think you're right, we're kind of at the max with that, and that would be very unpopular right now. But the transfer tax is something we haven't looked at, and of course, there's a lot of questions there. It's a lot to unpack with that, with the Charter City move and going to the voters with 2 initiatives, and it's a lot, but probably it's the one that I'd want to learn more about, and just to circle back about the parking thing, that's something I think has been worthy of discussion in the past. I don't think it has any real future in Healdsburg, and it's unless things change in terms of technology and implementation, maybe, or revenue. But certainly having a locals exception is the only way that's going to fly in Healdsburg. So we'd have to follow that too. But that's for another day. So my takeaway, and there's still, I think there's more to explore here, but I'd like to kind of dive deeper into what an increase in transfer tax would look like in Healdsburg, and see if that's something that we could move towards in the future.
Ron?
Yeah, the transfer tax to me, although I'd like to know more about it, it seems that the new home buyer is paying that as opposed to the seller, but I don't know that. And that is one that seems to bring in a reasonable amount of money. It would go to the voters. What our intention is to really say, okay, we can fix our streets, but here's what we need to do. And I think this conversation is starting that and really get people starting to think about how we approach this. And it's going to, I think, a tax that the voters approve. We can lead them and let them know that we believe this will help with the solution, but really to put it up to the voters to really decide, do they really want this transfer tax or some other type of tax added on to them?
And just to confirm, we're not trying to decide anything right here, right now, right? So also, I just want to mention, of course, we got our budget coming up pretty soon here in May. I think it is that we're going to do some budgeting or sooner than that. But and we also heard an update on the finances where we have surpluses that we're talking about being able to plug into some of our capital projects. So I think, this conversation along with all sort of combine in that seems like it would be a good opportunity to think about it, all of it as a whole, rather than like piecemeal, like just the roads, because there's a lot of other things we need to think about as well. But I appreciate the update, and it's pretty amazing. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want
Oh, I thought you had a question.
I do, but I don't want to cut you off before we move on.
I just appreciate that you took the time to kind of educate us about all of those things, because you don't always know how all the revenue pieces come together and all of the things that constrict what we can and can't do. So thank you for that. Go ahead.
I just wanted to comment on the conversation about the transfer tax. I thought one thing that was really interesting, and just in case there's somebody else from the public listening to this meeting besides the one person in the room, in our packet tonight, which so glad you're here. In our packet tonight, there's a link that talks about all the cities in California that have a transfer tax and what their transfer tax is. And that was very illuminating, because you really don't know until you look at that list. But there are a number of cities I was curious, because in your presentation, Assistant City Manager Metz, you talked about how if we wanted to do a transfer tax, we would have to do two things. One would be become a charter city by the will of the voters and ask the voters if they would adopt a transfer tax. And doing both of those things at the same time potentially could be confusing or could be cumbersome or whatever. It was interesting to see how many charter cities there are who don't have an additional transfer tax. Obviously, those who do have an additional transfer tax over the baseline, all are charter law cities, because you have to be a charter city to do that. But some of them have been really specific about how they do it on a graduated scale. So some of the cities that have transfer tax above whatever the status quo is, they've done it where it's like a little bit more if the home value is over $4 million, and then it's a lot more if the home transfer is more than $8 million. So it becomes somewhat like a mansion tax. Like, for example, in San Jose, they have 4 different categories. They have one that's the $2 million home value, that's a certain threshold, $2 million to $5 million, $5 million to $10 million, and then over $10 million, what it is, which is wild to me that they've even created a set of laws. And that is San Jose. It's a very different universe. And there's several other cities who have done a similar kind of graduated scale. So it becomes more of a mansion tax and less on a tax. And then I think also I had the same question. Is it something that the sellers pay or something that the buyers pay? And so I would be interested in kind of learning more about it. I think that there is ways in which other cities, I'm looking at this chart because it's literally every city in California and how they've done it. There's definitely ways where it is not something that's going to impact in a large way your kind of average single family home, and that it is much more geared towards a graduated scale that could generate revenue, but in a certain category of home sale. So I think that's an interesting thing that I'd be interested to learn more about as well. So thank you.
Okay, so we're ready to move on? Thank you. So thank you, April. Appreciate that. Our next new business, City Council discussion on microtransit options in Healdsburg. This was brought up by Councilmember Kelly. Would you like to address this?
Sure. So one of the things that we talked about in our climate mobilization strategy, and something that Assistant City Manager Sternfels was working on previously, was putting together a proposal for a microtransit solution in Healdsburg. And microtransit kind of is like a broad category of, it's not the city bus, but it's not Uber, and it's like something, there's like a lot of different things in between. But my request was to have this conversation is that we kind of have like an interesting confluence of events happening in town where we have a number of hotels that are just operating their own shuttles because they know that they have a transportation solution that's needed. So for example, Hotel Trio has been operating shuttle for some time. Montage doesn't have enough parking for their employees. So now they bought a shuttle and they're shuttling for their employees. Right now, Appalachian Hotel doesn't have a shuttle, but they're about to because the Burbank housing apartments are about to be done. And so that site is going to become very parking impacted. A lot of our senior communities have transit shuttles. So we're starting to see a lot of different local businesses or residents associations starting to kind of take this on their own because there isn't a comprehensive solution that's really working. For a long time, Sonoma County Transit, our transit operator in this region, was not amenable to making kind of like major changes. But with the conversations that have been happening with Freebird Development and the funds they received outside of the housing funds, they received several millions of dollars around how do you move your residents that are living there from this site to other places. And so they have been starting this conversation with Sonoma County Transit. And so there's kind of like a confluence of events happening, plus some funds that are now becoming available through various grant programs, and Napa County doing an on-demand transit service that's happening within some of their local communities where the Sonoma County Transportation Authority has offered to be a convener and work with local jurisdictions around solving some of these issues and kind of moving forward outside of the normal just running one fixed route with one shuttle bus that's free or low cost. And so my request was, we've already adopted this as a goal for the council. This is something that was in the climate mobilization strategy and something that staff has already been working on. But there is an opportunity to, I think, my request would be to create a council subcommittee of 2 council members that could work with staff who's already working on this and convene some of those partners and leverage some of the folks that are already working in this space. Petaluma has done something similar with a microtransit option that's already in place there, and they've seen a lot of success with it. And so I feel like we are the perfect size community to step into that space and do it at a time when, if we don't do it sooner, we're just going to keep seeing all of these disparate shuttle solutions that aren't really meeting like a comprehensive need. So there could be a cool opportunity to bring those folks together. So my request is, could we form a subcommittee to have council members working with staff who are already working on this and bring in some of the resources from other agencies that have grant funds and the expertise to assist with it?
Vice Mayor?
What would you imagine? First of all, I think this is a great idea, and this seems like a really good step to take at this time. Can you say a little bit more about what the outcome of the subcommittee would be? What would be the next step? How long that subcommittee would be operational? What do you imagine there?
I really don't know what the timeline would be. I would hope that like within 6 months going into budget for the next fiscal year for the council, which is 6 months from now in May, to have some sort of like, here's a menu of options of what is currently potential, what's available. Unclear if we would have enough there to move forward, but it would be like a set of recommendations or a conversation that we could then have at the whole council about, if we are serious about moving forward with a microtransit option, here's something that we could potentially implement. And if it would, and it may not have any expense associated with it for the council. It might not be a financial decision that we're making, but it could certainly be something that kind of leads into the next fiscal year. And my concern would be that if we wait until we've already adopted it, right? It's like part of the climate mobilization strategy. So I didn't think it needed to be necessarily a new goal, but that having council members participate in this conversation could potentially help yield kind of a more robust, comprehensive solution, given the different hats that we all wear and other agencies that we sit on, and just kind of our relationship with people in the community and like what we're hearing from folks about parking and shuttle challenges and those things. So potentially moving forward with a solution, 6 months maybe to come back. And I think the solution would only work if there was like, obviously we don't have funding for it in the current budget and no, additional revenue out there. So it would have to be either with a budget ask of the council to find, of staff to find that funds if there was funds needed, or, hey, we made an attempt, it's going to be expensive, we can't do it, here's why. And then we put the microtransit conversation to bed, potentially.
I imagine there's some avenues that include partnerships that would be really valuable to this moving forward. It's super interesting. Thanks.
Ron?
Yeah, I would have liked to see us put the genie back in the bottle of taking Montage, these other organizations going together instead of on their own. But as you stated previously, we had looked at the microtransit issue. And staff has been working on it. I'm curious as to why we couldn't continue staff going forward with this, as they have the connections and we've already started this process before. I think that we spoke about this and it was really expensive. As far as, and when we're talking about Freebird, that's one-time money, I believe, that they have. And I'm really not, I'd like us to do something that's not one-time funding and something that can benefit our broader community. I wouldn't want us to have it look like we're trying to cater to the north end of town, where we've got Smart Train coming, so we want to look at what we can do. I know we had talked about Ward Street, something about getting them moved around. So I think that staff had, if I'm not wrong, had actually looked at some of this previously.
That's correct. We did some investigation, as Councilmember Kelly alluded to. I was actually looking quickly to try to find the dates on that and didn't quite find it, but we did some investigation shortly after adoption of the climate strategy. Met with a vendor. The look at that time was for a citywide shuttle program, so that may or may not be the same thing as what we're talking about here. I understand there's some other players that might be differently positioned right now, but it was expensive. In the interest of candor, we met with a vendor who gave what were probably typical optimistic vendor projections of ridership to a very high level, but imagining a couple of shuttles based on service time and citywide service. And it was in the ballpark at that time of about $1 million a year, which may or may not be good value, but the number that was a little scary at the time was about $65 a ride, is my recollection. With that said, we did put in for a federal appropriation at that time. This was fiscal year 24. You may all recall that for a moment it looked like it had been funded and they issued a correction. So our hope had been to, on somebody else's dime, to launch a pilot program and see how it worked. As I said, those projections were very high level. Who knows how it, maybe ridership exceeds that, maybe costs are better, maybe we learn something about the operations that cause us to tweak the approach. But absent that funding, I think, as everybody acknowledged, for the city to go it alone on something like that was really just a non-starter. So it has been some time since there's been active exploration of that. It's something we could reignite if directed by the council. But it, based on our initial look, it was financially a problem. So that's why it hasn't been actively moving in the last year or so.
Okay, and I know that for our seniors, we do have our DASH program. And I know that, 2-3 years ago, getting an Uber or Lyft in Healdsburg was pretty much impossible. And just recently I had to, one of those scorching hot days, had to get up to, I dropped my car off and walked home in the morning from Big O Tires, but I said, it's kind of hot out there. And so I was able to get an Uber in like minutes. It's really improved in the city. So I think that between the DASH program, we've looked into this. I'm just not sure how we would go with knowing what it cost previously. I know the costs haven't gone down, so I'm not sure how to go forward with that, please.
So the developer at Saggio Hills has received millions and millions of dollars to go towards a transportation solution. And one of the things that they applied for in their grant, they know they're going to have to reallocate the money. The program that they were going to work with for a van pool shuttle option is not a viable solution anymore because of that operator. And so they're looking for a new solution and have over $500,000 just to explore this option. In addition, the Sonoma County Transportation Authority has been working on doing planning efforts with other cities. We never reached out to the Transportation Authority previously. I'm not sure why, but it seems like it would be a really obvious partner. In addition, we know that with the new leadership at Sonoma County Transit, which was previously a pretty strong barrier to really doing anything creative, like an on-demand option. The DASH program works if you know a week in advance, you need to make a reservation. So for a lot of seniors, they don't know that far in advance. It's a volunteer-run program. The city spent, quite a bit of money with an outlay to purchase those vehicles. The ridership is good, but a lot of folks aren't able to use it on a regular basis because it's not like an on-demand option, like an Uber on-demand, like I want to go here, I want you to pick me up here, different than that fixed route option. I do think we can put the genie back in the bottle with some of those businesses that I talked about, and they're not necessarily just looking at serving their visitors, their guests at Montage or Appalachian. They're worried about employees who live at the south end of town on Ward Street getting to work on the north end of town, and trying to eliminate some of the parking challenges that they have. So I think there is an option for it to be, I was talking about those because those are the newest developments to say, hey, we have a problem with how these places got built out. So all that to be said, also our air district funds the design of these kinds of programs, and they've done that. There's other air districts who've done that in other cities. So I think knowing that there are different agencies who have expertise in this that we never have reached out to as a city. We did work with VIA. Assistant City Manager Sternfels worked with a company called VIA to analyze what the options would be if we did an on-demand microtransit option in Healdsburg. VIA is like one of the private companies that does this nationally and internationally with a lot of other cities. They run the Bayview Hunters Point shuttle in San Francisco that just recently won a national award because they worked with the community on designing where do people need to go and doing it on demand. So I think we're on the right track with talking to VIA and sizing the program accordingly based on what would the residents' needs be. There's a lot of flexibility. You don't have to start with the largest option and hope that there's a lot of uptake. You could start with a smaller option and see. But there are funds and different things available to where I think it's never going to move forward if we keep the current pace. But I do think that we're in a unique moment right now to do something different. And my request would be that we have council members be able to participate in those conversations in a formal way with the request that we'd bring it back to the council along with staff when the time is right for that to happen.
Yeah, I'm just hesitant because I think that we've got really competent staff here that does a really good job on these things. And in fact, just looking at the the tax presentation tonight was very detailed, very thorough, going back on some of the other presentations that they've put together as far as knowing grants that are available, knowing all the intricacies. I think that staff would be better equipped to do this than a subcommittee would.
Yeah, I think the ideas that we're talking about are important, but I have a difficult time doing this as a committee, a subcommittee of the council, so that 2 council members would be working and directing staff on issues and then bringing them back to the rest of the council. I think I would rather see us direct staff to revisit this issue, to get into the room and to look at that. I don't understand the council at this point. I'm uncomfortable with that, with staff, with council doing staff work, basically.
I
what
guess
you're
it was
asking.
the benefit of getting to work with you in a subcommittee on the council protocols, where I found it to be really valuable that staff was doing research and kind of giving us because it's a complex question, right? We're not just looking, it's not just like here's a solution, let's adopt it. That process is a little bit more nuanced. And I think having the ability to work through those policy solutions and knowing when we need to come back to council for their questions, but then also giving feedback to staff and then letting them kind of chase the next components of it. And the balance of that felt like it was something that is a good model that we could use for other things. And that's why I was suggesting it.
But yeah, I understand and appreciate that, but the council protocols are about council business. So it made sense to me that the council would be weighing in that way. This is not, I mean, I guess everything is council business at one level or another, right? If we're going to make decisions, but this is not work that I think the council should be doing. I think it's the staff, and then they can come back to the full council and talk to us. I just really am uncomfortable with a subcommittee doing staff work. It doesn't work for me at all, I think. But I think the microtransit concept and the monies and pursuing this does. So I would recommend that we direct staff to continue that process. And I see you have something you want to say. Go ahead.
Well, I think what Councilmember Kelly has mentioned, or she mentioned it a little bit, was that as a member of, I'm going to get the letters right, STCTA, is that where we're at now? Okay, there's a C in there now. And that's given her, some insight into this problem, and she's seeing opportunities that weren't there. And so she's sort of in a unique position to move forward with that. Whereas, otherwise we might be kind of jumping in and learning from the ground up. And so I really appreciate the enthusiasm to do that, and also the fact that the timeliness of it. It might be quicker for council members to do some of this groundwork and avail ourselves of Councilmember Kelly's knowledge and connection on this to take that first step. So I'd be happy to help her with that. I'm volunteering if you want to move forward. But that's what I think it's something that is worth jumping into.
Sorry, and with all that, I forgot to mention that also I'm one of the directors on the SMART Board of Directors. We have 2 microtransit shuttles that operate for SMART, and SMART realized that they had this last mile connection problem at the ends of the line. So they're operating an on-demand shuttle from a third-party provider, both in Larkspur, at Larkspur Landing, and then at the airport. And so in that seat, I've been able to evaluate what the ridership has been for those shuttles, which is through the roof, and then also the way that they have been able to navigate some of the challenges with that shuttle and expanding it. And so I think also having the visibility and the relationships at SMART to see what has worked and what hasn't there. We've never connected, I don't believe staff has, since SMART has been operating those shuttles for the last 2 years, has connected with SMART staff to know that they're operating those shuttles, who the operator is, what they figured out, the lessons learned there. And so I think that would be some of the value of trying to bring some of those lessons learned from the other agencies in our region, like Petaluma or SMART or SCTCA or Napa Transportation Authority, and then knowing what are some of the challenges that people are facing in the business community that have said, we have a challenge that's impacting our business. Is there anything the city can do to help solve this? I think all of those components are what I would, hope to bring to share with staff and create those relationships and have for staff to have those conversations, but also to continue to move it forward. So that was the crux of the request.
I think I see staff here is all listening, attentive to this, and has the ability to do this. And I think that this is a great presentation. You've laid out to staff, you've laid out to council, what I think you've got us all agreeing on. We want to see some type of work on this microtransit. It's just how we go about doing it. And I just feel personally, where my lane is and how comfortable I have been with the presentations that staff has done. I mean, even going back when I got on council with how detailed the cannabis presentation was and how detailed the several issues have been. And I have faith in them to continue to bring us great information and have us deliberate as a body on these things, because I think it's better when the 4 or 5 of us have discussions on these very complex issues. And I just feel it's been beneficial in the past, and I'd like to see it continue going forward in that direction.
City Manager, do you have any weigh in on this topic?
Sure, I can offer a couple of thoughts. I think first, I think I just want to say, and I don't mean to sound like defensive or negative about this, but what we're talking about is a pretty substantial lift here, regardless of the structure. If we're looking at multiple agencies that might be able to offer a funding support, well, we pursue funding from certainly SCTCA regularly. We know how to do that. We know how to engage on that. But you also all know that can be a bit of a process that takes time. The application and management of that is significant. We have had some interactions with SMART about their programs, but certainly could engage further and on a deeper level. Part of what I've heard here, I think, hinges upon the willingness of hotel partners and perhaps Enzo Village to not run their own shuttles and participate in something larger. I don't know what that interest is. So then again, there's some engagement. So part of what I want to say, and maybe it's obvious, is that if we're going to lean into this and do it aggressively with the goal that we'll know something in 6 months, whatever it is, I just do want to acknowledge that that's a pretty substantial program, regardless of how we structure the council involvement. We can do that, of course, but we would need to reshuffle some things. And I just want to, I feel compelled to share that. Beyond that, whether or not it's a subcommittee, I think there's a couple of things to think about. It's not clear to me at this time what the vision is in terms of, is the subcommittee, doing that engagement, or is it working with staff on a more regular basis to have those conversations? I think that warrants some thought. As I hear some council uncertainty about the proposal, I imagine that part of it stems from not knowing what that is, and maybe not wanting to just kind of write a blank check to 2 council members out of 5 to be able to manage what that workload looks like and what that balance of labor looks like. So I think if that is something the council wants to consider tonight, I would recommend really thinking about that. So the entirety of the council, or at least the 4 of you who are with us tonight, understands what that commitment is before it's made elsewhere when you're not involved. And I would also encourage really thinking about what the end result of that is. If it's really, honestly, I just don't think we're going to launch a shuttle. Not that nobody said that, but in a matter of months. I think putting together funding proposals, partners, is a pretty long run. And I think it makes sense then, if you're going to think about a subcommittee, to think about an exit strategy or a kind of a goal. So because a subcommittee really shouldn't be something that runs in semi-perpetuity. So maybe it's a defined kind of launch of this, or if we think it's something going on and the whole council wants to be involved, maybe it's just, we'll do it how we normally do and get it back to the council and have that conversation. So there's different ways this can be spun. The more traditional way is that we bring you all updates and options. But I do feel compelled to say that in either scenario, if this is something we're going to launch, imminently, we're prepared to do that. I think we can do that well, but it's a meaningful lift, and it will impact some priorities. So I just want to share that.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Does it, I think, some part of this is motivated by, the enduring sense of urgency about climate issues in general. And, I think it's probably true that Councilmember Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, feels that, we don't want to let opportunities slip by and let things go on and kind of shuffled into the future. So the question is, if there's a subcommittee, is that going to move the process along quicker with more urgency than if there were not. And, you know, I know that staff would do a great job. There's no question about that. But you know, volunteering to step in and take part in this and shepherd the initial component, which I think is probably just to put some options together for the council. You know, I think that's how you answer that question. Mostly is just like to come up with a menu of what's really, you know, possible for Healdsburg. Then, you know, my question is, to what degree is that really going to be helpful and keep winning the sales with this microtransit idea?
I think what I've seen in, you know, as I'm thinking about this and hearing it, I look at Marsh Avenue project, to where staff came and we had a presentation, then we had a public meeting, we had outreach, all of those things. And I haven't seen a subcommittee work in that method with that determination of, you know, I know that if we hand it over to staff, they're going to do step A, they're going to give us some information back, then they're going to have public feedback, maybe even do a survey. And those are things that I think that staff has done over and over with large projects that have come before us. And to me, as a member of the community also, I feel comfortable knowing that I've got this big mitt that's taking care of everything. It's not just a few of us, but it's all of us steering to make this a good proposal. And it is a good proposal. It really is. And I'm just thinking of the best way to bring the most involvement in and using the expertise that our staff has on this.
Well, it sounds like there's definitely, and correct me if I'm wrong, consensus that a microtransit option is something that we would like. I mean, we already adopted it as part of the climate mobilization strategy, but it is something that we would like to continue seeing staff and the city evaluating options on. And everybody is nodding their heads. So I guess maybe one question I have is if it is something that is, you know, we've already adopted it, so that's not the question. It's more of, is this something we want to see have staff connect with those other agencies in a more holistic way to really evaluate what are other cities doing? Because other people have really already unlocked this. What are other agencies doing, like SMART? And then the funds that are currently available, I would hate to see us miss that window, because I know the Saggio developer, Freebird, received these funds and they're actively trying to come up with a solution right now of how to best spend them that's going to better, you know, improve for their future residents, but also the whole city if it's possible. And connecting to SMART is one of the things they're thinking about, because they know how many people will be using SMART and they're nowhere near SMART and they know it. So now they're trying to figure out how do we get people from point A to point B. So I'm fine with, you know, just putting this up to the hope that staff can move forward and prioritize this, as it seems like it's something we want to see happen in our lifetime, and hopefully be able to leverage some of those funds that are out there. I also, when I talked to the staff at SCTCA, because we got this presentation from Napa about what other cities similarly sized to us are doing that are successful solutions, they asked if we had put the microtransit option on as one of our projects in the call for projects to SMART. Do you guys remember when we had those projects and we had that community meeting and people could prioritize which roadway project they wanted to see happen? And I said it wasn't on our list because I didn't even think that it was like a thing that would connect, right? Like we're applying for roadway. Here's our 5 projects we want to see funded and considered in the next round. One was the Dry Creek Road interchange roundabouts. Do you remember that list of projects? And so that was also an interesting we should have thought about how does the climate mobilization strategy connect to our roadway project strategy, and what are some of the things that might be on the same page there. So that was, other cities are starting to put some of those types of, you know, not necessarily it's a roadway project, but it's a transit and transportation solution project on their list of projects that they're asking for either funding or technical support on from the planning staff at SCTCA. Because while I think Larry is incredibly competent and amazing director, he is not like a transit operator, right? Like we don't operate our own bus in Healdsburg for a reason. And I think, having, leveraging the expertise in our region, who is our partner agency, they're ready, willing, and able to like help us in that. So that's just like another interesting intersection point that, no pun intended, that could be a way to leverage, who wants to help us solve this problem that we've already identified as a priority.
And I think I want to reinforce what you were saying is that us as council members, we talk with other people and agencies, and I know our staff talks, I know our city manager talks with other city managers. I know our transportation people talk with other people, and they have those stronger connections than we might have over their years of their developing their professional careers. So I think that we can really leverage them in going forward with this. I'm looking at.
So, excuse me. So to try and sum up here, I think that at least two of us are not comfortable with a subcommittee, but all of us are comfortable perhaps with directing staff to listen to all the stuff that's been said here today and circle back maybe with montage. Is it montage or okay, and the Freebird and all those, to kind of see what they have, what they're looking at, what they want, what their plans are, and to see how that can all fit into what the city of Healdsburg needs. And to Ron's point, I think also the idea of, public input and whatnot is an important component of anything that we try to do here. But I would like to say, direct staff to take this issue up, make it a priority. But of course, then that always means other things have to get moved, right? That's the other problem. And I guess that's why you think it will get elevated if it's a council thing, but I don't think that's a good approach. I'm not prepared to do that. Let me just say that. Go ahead.
So, yeah, but I just want to emphasize that there is a timeliness here that I think Councilmember Kelly has illustrated carefully. And so that's just what I would like to emphasize is that it is going to be a struggle to start immediately on this, and things have to get shuffled. But if there's opportunities that are out in front of us now, then we got to be careful to not lose those.
Agreed. Yeah. So does that work for you?
Yes, and thank you all for the thoughts and the conversation. I'd like to take a little bit of time. Some of the ideas here I'm hearing for the first time myself, and I'd like to take a little bit of time to think about what our initial work plan looks like and lean on the team. And so we can talk about that as soon as 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. But what I'm envisioning at this point is we'll try to get back fairly quick to council, not with results quite that quick, but with our thoughts on what this effort looks like and what steps are coming, and do a check-in. Obviously, then you all can tell us if we're on the right track or if we'd like to pivot a little bit.
Councilmember Kelly.
I just want to thank you all for being able to put this on the agenda and have a somewhat amorphous conversation that's a little difficult to wrap our heads around. It's not the traditional, like, here's a staff report, here's the recommended action. So thank you for going on this journey. And hopefully we get to go on this journey again on an on-demand shuttle bus coming to a city near you. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Okay, so moving right along. Council reports on matters of interest occurring since previous regular meeting, expense reimbursement reports. Who would like to start us off, Ron?
Yeah, I had a Veterans Day. It's always nice to meet with our veterans and speak with them. And this year was even just amazing with Alice Darrow, who's 106 years old, to tell the story of how she met her husband and was the nurse, and he had a bullet in his heart, and one of her grandchildren made a silver duplicate of that so that she could donate that actual bullet to Honolulu at the museum there. Also met with the Senior Citizens Advisory Committee, and I'm really looking forward to when we have a presentation about the end of life program. That was Katie kind of mentioned that shortly. It is amazing the work that Taya has been doing along with our senior citizens, staff, their subcommittee. It's just amazing how far that's moving on. Also was able to jump in here with the Sonoma County Mayor's Association with the presentation of Redwood Food Bank. And I think one of the things, not only just the number, but came out of that, and I don't know if the community knows it, of how to actually use supplemental nutrition. And what came out of that is that you should utilize the food bank and those programs first to save your dollars, and then see what you then can need to spend at the grocery store, rather than spending your money. Because one of the things that came out is a lot of people that are using these services have never used them before and don't really kind of know how to do it. I think one of the things they say is, unfortunately, lower income gets squeezed more because they know how to squeeze a dime better than anybody. And so I think that as newer people are feeling these stresses, to really understand that these programs can help you understand how to extend your dollar. So that's my week right there.
Thank you, Ron. Vice Mayor?
Sure. Just a couple things. I went to the Generation Housing meeting last week with Councilmember Kelly and Director Sotomayor, and Griselda was there, and that was I would hesitate to say inspiring. It's daunting. I mean, the numbers that really should happen in housing are very, they're going to be difficult to approach. So that definitely animated the conversation about ADUs today, and so I'll just leave it at that. Those events are always pretty informative, and it's good to touch in on the issue in a broader sense. I attended the Boys and Girls Club demolition event, which was fun. I actually kind of saw it firsthand walking by one day. They just were starting on it, but they had an event a couple of days ago up there where they made a showy, tractor crash on the building. It was really fun, and it was a great moment. It's a great milestone on a project that's going to be really transformative for a lot of people in Healdsburg. So it was great to be there for that. And I just happened to, as I was leaving, watch the Ruby Bridges march that the kids from ATS were doing, and that was really fun. They were very animated. They had costumes and had made drums and stuff, and so I was really happy to stand up by the sidewalk and cheer for them. And that's it. But I did want to make a quick mention that our Healdsburg School District was recently recognized among 4 districts in the whole state by the Department of Education in California for advances in their academic performance, which those of us who are part of the school are aware of this, but it's really a great recognition of some important work at the school that our whole community can be proud of.
That's great. Thank you. Ariel?
Last meeting at the Northern Sonoma County Air Pollution Control District, we received the annual hotspots report for our high risk, intermediate, and low risk emitter sites for emissions in our region. So for those folks who are curious about air quality, I highly recommend checking out that report. It's available on Northern Sonoma County Air Pollution Control District, or nosocoair.org. And then I attended the Catholic Charities Fund a Future Citizen event. Catholic Charities is one of the many agencies across our country who host a program for legal permanent residents who have gone through the legal pathways to citizenship, and they help fund the education programs and the legal fees for permanent residents who want to become citizens. So their funding was slashed dramatically from the Trump administration, unfortunately. And so they are going out into the community to raise philanthropic dollars to help continue to push that program forward. The program was already underway when the funds were taken away from them. And so it's left a very large hole in Catholic Charities' budget. Catholic Charities runs that program program in Healdsburg as well as in other places around the county. And it's a program that helps folks prepare for the citizenship exam. And then also the application fees through USCIS for the interview and to become a citizen. So that was a really uplifting, beautiful event. A lot of folks came out to Agave to support them. Generation Housing Summit, as Vice Mayor Herod mentioned, there were probably about 100 or more people there at Redwood Credit Union for the Generation Housing report release, which was very interesting. An enlightening and daunting report about just how deficient we are in our region in terms of meeting the necessary housing goals of the next decade and really how far behind we are. And also some really actionable things that they proposed and challenged, frankly, the cities and the policymakers in the audience to consider. And then I attended on Saturday the Chamber of Commerce Season 2 Sparkle, I think is what it's called, or Season of Sparkle kickoff event at Barn Diva and Barn Diva Studio on Saturday. So it's great to see some of the chamber board members there and business community folks. And it'll be a really fun, festive time of year that's officially underway. I did want to ask, per the Generation Housing presentation that I attended, they recommended, and it seemed like a really interesting opportunity for Healdsburg to look at that AB 1033 as one of the housing solutions. So my agenda request would be to request that we have a conversation about AB 1033 or have staff look at that as part of the overall housing package that'll be continuing to move forward. Thanks.
So you're requesting to agendize what again? Please say that again.
A conversation about Assembly Bill 1033, which is the ADU policy bill around condo conversion for ADUs. And it's an opt-in law, so it's not something that's mandated to every city, but it would have to be something we would request to have staff evaluate and bring to us in the future.
So you want to agendize talking about it to do the request?
I don't know if we need to agendize it, because it would be, if it seems as though it's something we want to be evaluated by our planning department, since they're already evaluating all these other housing laws, I feel like maybe we could skip the step of having a conversation about it before we ask them to include it in the things that they're evaluating. I'm not sure if that's possible. I know they're looking at all the different housing laws and trying to figure out which ones. Sam's getting nervous, so. Not nervous. Oh. It's weird. Scott refuses to make eye contact with anyone right now. No, just teasing. So yeah, I don't know what the right step would be, but that's the request, is that eventually there's some sausage made at the city level and we get to talk about 1033 at a future date and what the right way to do that is. I'm just buying us time right now while they're whispering in the corner.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure what'll come out of that, but I'll say, I don't know either at this point. I'd want some time. There are some things that are coming down the chute for you all pretty fast.
And I don't think this can happen that fast.
Fair enough. I don't know for sure, but I'm sure you also all don't want to upend that progress necessarily. If you will all indulge me in sort of a vague request for an agenda item, which I think is supportive of what you're getting at.
I would vaguely like to request an agenda item,
If the
Jeff.
demand is that we maybe use some staff discretion to figure out the best way to bring that back, assuming the council agrees to do so, we'll look at options and try to cut out some unnecessary steps.
I really want to defer to the city manager in setting the staff work plan, and nothing substantive to add.
Okay, so I'm not quite sure where we are at this point on that one.
How about this? If the direction of the council is to agendize discussion or action on 1033, it's 1033, right? We will use some discretion to, if you'll trust us, to figure out what we think is the best way to get that done. And that might mean it comes as part of a package. It might mean it comes as a standalone request for direction. I think
Yeah.
we need some time to strategize before we know what the best way to do that is.
I think we can leave that up to you then to do that. Yes, thank you. We agree on that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And with that, you already gave all my information out in the beginning of so everybody heard it on the food bank. So with that, we'll adjourn the meeting at 9:04.